They called her barren, worthless, a woman whose womb would never cradle life. So her own father dragged her to the town square and sold her like cattle. $1 silver, the price of shame. The crowd laughed. The auctioneer sneered. But then a silent cowboy with 5 broken children stepped forward, and everything changed. This is the story of Hannah Creston, the woman they said couldn't give children until she became mother to 5 who desperately needed her. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far Hannah's story travels across the world. The New Mexico sun beat down like a hammer on an anvil, turning the dirt streets of Redemption Hollow into waves of shimmering heat. Hannah Creston stood on the wooden auction platform in the town square, her hands bound loosely in front of her, not tight enough to hurt, but visible enough to humiliate. Sweat trickled down her spine beneath the faded blue dress that had once belonged to her mother, back when mothers and dignity still existed in her life. "Gentlemen," her father's voice boomed across the square, thick with whiskey and desperation. Thomas Creston swayed slightly as he gestured toward his daughter, like she was a mare with questionable breeding. "I present to you my daughter, Hannah. 23 years old, strong as an ox, can cook, clean, sew, and tend a garden better than any woman in 3 territories." Hannah kept her eyes fixed on the horizon, on the purple mountains that promised escape she'd never reach. She'd learned years ago that looking at their faces, at the judgment, the pity, the cruel amusement, only made it worse. "She's got all her teeth," Thomas continued, and Hannah felt her cheeks burn. "Good temperament, reads and writes, knows her Bible verses." "Get to the bad part, Tom!" someone shouted from the crowd. Laughter rippled through the gathered men like a rattlesnake's warning. Thomas Creston's jovial expression cracked, revealing the bitterness underneath. "Fine. You want the truth?" He turned toward Hannah, and she saw the loathing in his bloodshot eyes, the same loathing he'd carried since the doctor's diagnosis 3 years ago. "She's barren. Can't bear children. Doctor confirmed it after her accident with the horse. Something about her insides got damaged." The crowd's energy shifted. The interested murmurs died. Several men who'd been leaning forward sat back, arms crossed. Now, Thomas said quickly, raising his hands. "That don't make her useless. She can still cook your meals, mend your clothes, warm your bed. What man wants a wife who can't give him sons?" This came from Gerald Hutchins, the town's wealthiest merchant, a man whose own wife had just given birth to their 7th child. His voice carried the particular cruelty of someone who'd never known deprivation. "That's like buying a cow that can't produce milk." More laughter. Hannah's fingernails dug into her palms. "She's worth something to somebody," Thomas insisted, but his voice had turned pleading, pathetic. "I'll start the bidding at $5. $5 for a woman who'll work her fingers to the bone and never complain." Silence, the kind that screamed louder than words. Hannah finally allowed herself to look at the crowd. 30, maybe 40 men scattered across the square. Some leaned against the general store's porch railing. Others sat on wagon tailgates. A few stood in the dusty street, thumbs hooked in their belt loops. Not one met her eyes. They studied their boots, the sky, the dirt. Anything but the woman being sold because her body had betrayed her. $4, Thomas said, voice cracking. $4, and she's yours." A woman in a green calico dress whispered something to her companion, and they both tittered behind their hands. Hannah recognized them. Martha Simmons and her sister, Constance. Women who'd once invited her to their quilting circle back before the diagnosis. Back when she'd still been human to them. $3, Thomas tried again. "Come on, boys, $3 is nothing, less than a good saddle blanket." "Saddle blanket's more useful," someone muttered, and the crowd roared with laughter. Hannah's vision blurred. Not with tears, she'd learned to stop those years ago, but with a kind of white-hot numbness that came from realizing your own father would debase you for the price of another whiskey bottle. She'd known he was going to do this. He told her 3 nights ago, when he'd come home drunk and raging about the debts he owed to every shopkeeper and saloon owner in town. "You're the reason we're cursed," he'd snarled, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. "Your mother died bringing you into this world, and you can't even do the one thing women are made for. You're a punishment from God, girl, but you're going to be useful for once in your miserable life." She hadn't fought, hadn't argued. What was the point? Her brother Samuel had left for the California goldfields 2 years ago and never looked back. She had no other family, no friends who'd risk their reputation by associating with the barren woman, no money of her own. In 1875 New Mexico territory, a woman without family or fertility might as well be a ghost. $2, Thomas's voice broke. Somebody? Anybody? Reverend Blackwood, standing near the church steps, shook his head slowly. Not in judgment of the auction. He'd sanctioned it, had told Thomas it was his right as a father to settle his daughter's future, but in what looked like disappointment that no one was bidding. $2 for damaged goods? That was Clyde Morrison, the blacksmith, his voice carrying easy cruelty. Tom, I paid more for my last hunting dog, and at least he's good for something. The laughter that followed felt like knives. Hannah's legs trembled. She'd been standing on this platform for nearly 20 minutes, and the heat was making her dizzy. Or maybe it wasn't the heat. Maybe it was the realization that this was her life now, being auctioned like livestock worth less than a dog, while her father counted down her value dollar by dollar. $1, Thomas finally whispered. $1, and I'll throw in her mother's wedding ring. Hannah's head snapped toward him. No, she said, the first word she'd spoken since he'd dragged her from their ramshackle house that morning. Papa, not Mama's ring? He wouldn't look at her. Shut your mouth, girl. You lost the right to that ring when you proved you'd never use it proper. $1, he shouted again to the crowd. $1 single dollar. That's less than a bottle of rot-gut whiskey. Surely one of you men can use a housekeeper, even if she ain't good for nothing else. The silence stretched so long Hannah could hear a dog barking 3 streets over, could hear the creak of the saloon doors, could hear her own heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape the humiliation her body couldn't flee. Then, from the back of the crowd, a voice like gravel and honey. I'll pay it. Every head turned. A man stood beside a weathered wagon, one hand resting on the sideboard. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that spoke of years hauling fence posts and breaking horses. His face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but Hannah could see the sharp cut of his jaw, the strong line of his nose. He wore simple clothes, denim pants, a faded blue work shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, scuffed leather boots. His hands, she noticed, were calloused but clean. Did you say you'll pay it? Thomas asked, suddenly animated. The whole dollar? The man stepped forward, and the crowd parted for him like the Red Sea before Moses. There was something in his bearing, a quiet authority that had nothing to do with wealth or position and everything to do with a man who knew his own worth and didn't need anyone's validation. I said I'll pay it, he repeated, and his voice was different up close. Rough from disuse, maybe, but steady, certain. $1 silver for the woman. He didn't say damaged goods, didn't say barren, just the woman, like Hannah was still a person with dignity. Thomas nearly fell off the platform in his eagerness. Done! Sold to... He paused. I'm sorry, friend, I don't recall your name. Cole Mercer. A ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Hannah had heard the name before. Everyone in the territory had. The Mercer Ranch sat 15 miles north of town, a sprawling operation that had once been the most prosperous in the region. But then tragedy had struck. Cole Mercer's wife had died 3 years ago, leaving him with 5 young children. Since then, he'd become almost a ghost, rarely coming to town, never socializing, just working his land with grim determination. The Mercer Ranch, Thomas said, nodding eagerly. Good, good. Respectable place. She'll work hard for you, Mr. Mercer. I promise you that. Cole reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a single silver dollar. He mounted the platform steps with an easy grace that seemed at odds with his size and placed the coin in Thomas Creston's outstretched palm. Our business is concluded, Cole said simply. Thomas clutched the coin like it was salvation itself. Yes, yes, of course, she's all yours. He turned to Hannah, and for just a moment she thought she saw something like regret flicker across his face, but then he blinked, and it was gone, replaced by the same bitter resentment she'd lived with for 3 years. Get your things and go with Mr. Mercer, girl, and don't come back. Hannah's throat tightened. This was it. After 23 years, her father was severing their bond for the price of a bottle of whiskey. Not that there'd been much of a bond left to sever. Cole looked at her for the first time, really looked at her, and Hannah braced herself for what she'd see. Disgust, pity, maybe a calculating assessment of what he'd gotten for his dollar. Instead, his dark eyes held something she couldn't quite name. Not kindness, exactly. More like understanding, like he knew what it was to be ground down by life and measured by what you'd lost instead of what you could still give. "Ma'am," he said quietly, and gestured toward the wagon. Hannah's hands were shaking as she descended the platform steps. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Behind her, she heard the crowd already dispersing, their entertainment concluded. Someone laughed about something unrelated. Someone else called out a greeting. Life in Redemption Hollow moved on, indifferent to the fact that Hannah Creston's life had just been sold for less than the cost of a decent meal. She had nothing to collect. The dress she wore, the thin shawl around her shoulders, and the worn boots on her feet were all she owned. Thomas had sold or drunk away everything else of value long ago. Cole walked beside her to the wagon, his stride measured to match hers. He didn't touch her, didn't try to hurry her, just moved like a silent shadow. When they reached the wagon, he held out his hand to help her up. Hannah hesitated. In all the scenarios she'd imagined for this moment, and she'd imagined many over the past 3 days, she'd never pictured this quiet courtesy. "I can help myself," she said, and immediately regretted how harsh it sounded. But Cole just nodded and stepped back, giving her space. She climbed onto the wagon seat, settling onto the sun-warmed wood. Cole moved around to the other side and pulled himself up with easy strength. The wagon dipped under his weight, then settled. For a long moment, he didn't move. Just sat there, hands resting on his thighs, staring straight ahead at the 2 horses hitched to the wagon, a matched pair of bays with kind eyes. Finally, he spoke. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it true." Hannah waited, her spine rigid. "You won't be judged at my ranch," Cole said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Not for what you can't do. Not for what people say you lack. My children need help. I won't lie about that. They need someone to cook and clean and mend their clothes. But they also need someone who will be patient with their grief, someone who won't expect them to be something they're not." He turned to look at her then, and his eyes were the color of good earth after rain. "I figure a woman who's been judged unfairly her whole life might understand that better than most." Hannah's throat closed up. She couldn't speak, couldn't even nod. All she could do was stare at the stranger who'd just bought her freedom disguised as bondage. Cole picked up the reins. "I won't touch you," he continued, eyes forward again. "You'll have your own room. You'll eat at the table with us, not like hired help. And if you ever want to leave, you just say the word, and I'll drive you anywhere you want to go. But I hope," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "I hope you'll give us a chance. My kids have lost enough. I think maybe you have too." He clicked his tongue, and the horses started moving, pulling the wagon away from the town square, away from the crowd, away from the only life Hannah had ever known. She didn't look back, didn't watch her father disappear behind them, didn't give Redemption Hollow the satisfaction of seeing tears. Instead, she looked ahead at the road that stretched toward the purple mountains, toward the unknown, toward a ranch where 5 motherless children waited. "What are their names?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. Cole glanced at her, something that might have been relief crossing his face. "Jonah's 12. He's the oldest, tries to be the man of the house when I'm out working the cattle. Caleb's 9. Sharp as a tack, asks about 1,000,000 questions a day. Eli's 7, quietest of the bunch. Hardly says a word since his mother passed. Then there's the twins, Millie and Noah. They just turned 5. 5 children, Hannah murmured. It seemed impossible that she'd gone from a house with just her and her drunken father to a household of 6 people in the span of 20 minutes. 5 reasons I haven't given up yet, Cole said softly. Then, as if realizing he'd revealed too much, he fell silent. They rode in that silence for a long while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels, the plod of the horses' hooves, and the wind moving through the scrub brush. The town fell away behind them, replaced by rolling hills of yellow grass and scattered juniper trees. The mountains grew larger on the horizon. Hannah studied Cole from the corner of her eye. He was younger than she'd first thought, probably early 30s, though the lines around his eyes spoke of hard years and harder losses. His hands on the reins were steady, competent. There was a wedding ring still on his left hand, she noticed. 3 years, and he hadn't removed it. Why did you do it? The question escaped before she could stop it. Cole was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "Because I remember what it's like to be measured by your worst moment instead of your whole life. Because my wife would have spit fire if she'd seen what that town was doing to you. And because," he exhaled slowly, "because sometimes doing the right thing is the only choice that lets you sleep at night." "You didn't have to spend your money." "It was $1, Cole interrupted gently. "I've wasted more than that on things that mattered a lot less." Hannah turned to look at him fully then, really look at him. This man who'd stepped out of the crowd when no one else would, who'd given her back a shred of dignity when the world had tried to strip her of everything. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole's jaw tightened. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met my children." Something in his tone made Hannah's stomach clench. "Are they difficult?" "They're hurting," Cole said. "And hurt people sometimes lash out at the ones trying to help. Especially Jonah. He's protective. Angry that his mother's gone. Angry at the world. Probably going to be angry at you, too, at first." "I can handle angry," Hannah said, thinking of her father's rages, the town's cruelty. "Maybe," Cole said, "but I want you to know what you're walking into. They're not going to welcome you with open arms. They're going to test you, push you away, make it hard. And He trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words. "I can't promise I'll always know how to help. I'm doing my best, but some days my best doesn't feel like enough." The raw honesty in his voice struck something deep in Hannah's chest. Here was a man who just bought a woman at auction, and he was the one apologizing, the one worried he wouldn't measure up. "I don't break easy," Hannah said quietly. "Life's already done its worst to me. Whatever your children throw at me, I've survived worse." Cole nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." They traveled for nearly an hour in silence after that, the afternoon sun arcing toward evening. The landscape changed gradually, the scrub brush giving way to better grass, the hills rolling into gentle valleys. Hannah saw cattle grazing in the distance, their red coats bright against the yellow grass, saw a creek winding through a stand of cottonwood trees, the leaves starting to turn gold with the approaching autumn. Then, as they crested a rise, she saw it, the Mercer Ranch. It sprawled across a valley like something out of a dream, or maybe a memory of what prosperity looked like. The main house was larger than Hannah expected, a 2-story structure made of honey-colored wood with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Beside it stood a barn that had once been red, but was now faded to the color of dusty roses. Beyond that, a chicken coop, a smokehouse, various outbuildings, and corrals where horses stood with their heads down in the shade. But something was wrong. As they drew closer, Hannah could see it. The house's paint was peeling. Several porch boards looked rotted. The garden beside the house was a tangle of dead plants and weeds. Laundry hung crooked on a sagging line, and through the open front door she could glimpse chaos, boots scattered on the floor, coats piled on furniture, the general disorder of a household without a woman's hand. "It's not much to look at anymore," Cole said, and for the first time she heard shame in his voice. "We've been surviving, not living. I work dawn to dark trying to keep the ranch going. And the kids, they do their best, but they're just children." "It's more than I had an hour ago," Hannah said honestly. Cole pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house. Before he could set the brake, the front door banged open and children tumbled out like puppies, loud, chaotic, and moving so fast Hannah couldn't count them all at first. "Papa's home!" A little girl with wild blonde curls shrieked, launching herself off the porch with complete disregard for the 3-foot drop. "Millie, careful!" Cole was off the wagon in an instant, catching the child mid-flight. She wrapped her arms around his neck and giggled, and the sound was so pure, so full of uncomplicated joy, that Hannah felt something crack in her chest. The other children clustered around the wagon. A boy with Cole's dark hair and serious eyes, Jonah, had to be, stood back with his arms crossed. Another boy, younger, with a smattering of freckles across his nose, stared up at Hannah with unabashed curiosity. A thin child with haunted eyes hung back near the porch steps, half hidden. And another little blonde blur circled the wagon, making neighing sounds. "Papa, I'm a horse," the second blonde child announced. "No, a horse." "I see that, Noah," Cole said, setting Millie down but keeping one hand on her shoulder as if afraid she'd launch herself at something else. He looked at his children, and Hannah watched his expression transform, all the weariness falling away, replaced by a love so fierce it was almost painful to witness. "Kids, this is Miss Hannah Creston. She's going to be staying with us, helping out around the house." The silence that fell was immediate and absolute. Even Noah stopped galloping. Jonah's eyes narrowed. "Staying? For how long?" "As long as she wants to," Cole said evenly. "We don't need help," Jonah said, his voice hard despite the crack of adolescence in it. "We've been doing fine on our own." Cole's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the freckled boy, Caleb, piped up. "Are you going to cook? 'Cause Papa burns everything, and Jonah's biscuits taste like rocks." "They do not," Jonah snapped. "Do too. I chipped a tooth on one." "You did not, boys," Cole said, and the single word cut through the bickering like a knife. He looked at Hannah, apology written across his face. "Let me help you down." Hannah climbed down from the wagon herself, her legs stiff from the ride. As soon as her feet touched the ground, Millie darted forward, circling her like a curious cat. "You're pretty," Millie announced. "How come you're here? Did Papa buy you at the store? He buys sugar at the store. Are you sweet like sugar?" "Millie, don't," Cole started, but Hannah surprised herself by laughing. "I'm not sure I'm sweet," she said, kneeling down to Millie's level. "But I'm here to help your papa take care of you, if that's all right." Millie tilted her head, studying Hannah with disconcertingly adult eyes. "Mama used to take care of us, but she died. Are you going to die too?" The question hit like a physical blow. Hannah heard Cole's sharp intake of breath, saw Jonah's face close off completely. "Millie," Cole said, his voice rough, "that's not—" "Everyone dies eventually," Hannah said gently, meeting the little girl's eyes. "But I'm not planning on doing it anytime soon. I just got here." Millie considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Okay, you can stay, but you can't have Mama's rocking chair. That's mine now." "I wouldn't dream of taking your mother's rocking chair," Hannah said softly. Jonah made a disgusted sound. "Come on, Caleb, let's finish our chores before it gets dark." He stalked off toward the barn, and after a moment's hesitation, Caleb followed, though he kept glancing back at Hannah with open curiosity. The quiet child, Eli, had disappeared entirely back into the house like a shadow. Cole sighed, rubbing his face with one hand. "I'm sorry. I told you they were—" "They're fine," Hannah interrupted. "They're protecting themselves. I understand that." Cole looked at her for a long moment, something like respect dawning in his eyes. "Let me show you the house." The interior was worse than the exterior had suggested. Not dirty, exactly. Someone had been making an effort, but chaotic in the way only a house without a woman's organization could be. Dishes were stacked haphazardly in the kitchen, clothes draped over every chair, books and toys littered the floor. The curtains hung crooked, and dust motes danced in the slanting afternoon light. But underneath the chaos, Hannah could see the bones of something beautiful. Good furniture, handcrafted with care. A stone fireplace that dominated the main room, windows positioned to catch the morning sun. This had been someone's dream home once. "It's overwhelming," Cole said, misreading her silence. "I know. I've been meaning to get it organized, but there's never enough time, and I can't ask the kids to—" "It's not overwhelming," Hannah said, running her hand along the back of a chair, feeling the smooth wood. "It's just been grieving, same as your children. Houses do that, you know, when they lose the person who loved them." Cole stared at her. That's exactly what it feels like." Hannah turned to face him. "Show me where I'll sleep, and then let me get started. If I'm going to be here, I might as well make myself useful." "Hannah, you just got here. You don't have to—" "I want to," she said simply. And it was true. For the first time in 3 years since the doctor had told her she'd never bear children, Since her father had started looking at her like she was a burden instead of a daughter, Hannah wanted something, wanted to take this broken, grieving house and help it remember how to breathe. Cole led her upstairs, past doors that Hannah assumed led to the children's rooms, to a room at the end of the hall. It was small but clean, with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the valley. Someone had put fresh sheets on the bed. Wildflowers, already wilting, sat in a jar on the dresser. "Caleb picked those," Cole said, noticing her gaze. He thought you should have something nice." Hannah touched the flowers gently. "They're perfect." Cole lingered in the doorway. "Hannah, I meant what I said. You don't have to earn your place here. You don't have to prove anything." "Maybe I'm not trying to prove anything to you," Hannah said quietly. "Maybe I'm trying to prove something to myself." Understanding flashed across Cole's face. "All right then. Kitchen's yours if you want it. I need to check on the cattle before dark. Make sure everything's secure. Jonah and Caleb should have finished their chores. Eli will probably stay in his room. The twins," he smiled slightly. "God only knows what the twins will do." After he left, Hannah stood in her new room for exactly 30 seconds, letting the reality of her situation settle over her. Then she set her jaw, smoothed her dress, and went downstairs to face whatever came next. The kitchen was the worst of it. 3 days of dishes piled in the dry sink, a stove coated in grease, a floor that stuck to her boots. But there was a pump at the sink that ran clear water, and someone had laid in good supplies of flour, lard, salt, and dried beans. The root cellar, when she found it, held potatoes, onions, and carrots. Hannah rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She started with the dishes, heating water on the stove and scrubbing each plate, cup, and pot until they shone. Then the counters, then the floor, on her hands and knees with a scrub brush she found under the sink. The physical labor felt good, purposeful. Each clean surface was a small victory against the chaos. As she worked, children drifted in and out like curious cats. Noah appeared first, announcing he was hungry. Hannah gave him a carrot from the root cellar, and he crunched it happily while watching her scrub. "You're messy," he observed. "You got water all over your dress." "Oh, good thing it was already old," Hannah said. "Mama used to sing when she cleaned," Noah said, his small voice suddenly subdued. "Papa says she had the prettiest voice in the whole territory." Hannah's hands stilled in the soapy water. "That sounds lovely." "Can you sing?" "Not very well," Hannah admitted. "That's okay. Papa can't sing either. He sounds like a cow." Noah said this with such cheerful frankness that Hannah had to bite back a laugh. Millie came next, dragging a rag doll with one arm missing. She climbed onto a chair and watched Hannah in silence for several minutes before speaking. "Do you know how to braid hair?" Hannah looked at the wild tangle of curls around Millie's face. "I do." "Jonah tries, but he pulls too hard, and Papa's fingers are too big, and Mama—" Millie's voice trailed off. "Mama used to braid it real pretty, with ribbons and everything." "Would you like me to try?" Hannah asked gently. Millie nodded, hope and wariness warring in her small face. Hannah dried her hands and sat down, lifting Millie onto her lap. The child was tiny, all sharp angles and nervous energy. Her hair was a mess of knots and tangles that spoke of months of neglect. Hannah worked carefully, gently, untangling each knot with patient fingers, murmuring soft reassurances when Millie flinched. "Your hair is beautiful," Hannah said as she worked. "Like spun gold." "That's what Mama used to say," Millie whispered. Then, even softer, "I'm forgetting what she looked like. Isn't that bad? I'm forgetting my own Mama." Hannah's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart. That's not bad. That's just how time works sometimes. But you know what? You can remember how she made you feel instead. The safe, warm feeling of being loved. That never goes away, even when faces get fuzzy." Millie twisted around to look at Hannah, tears shimmering in her blue eyes. "Really?" "Really," Hannah promised, and finished the braid, tying it off with a piece of string from her pocket. Millie hopped down and ran to look at herself in the reflection of a window. "It's pretty." She turned back to Hannah, something fierce in her small face. "Can you do it again tomorrow?" "Every day if you want." After Millie skipped away, Hannah returned to cleaning. She scrubbed the stove until the iron gleamed, then mixed up biscuit dough and set it to baking. The kitchen slowly transformed from disaster to haven, the warm smell of bread filling the air. Caleb appeared as the sun was setting, drawn by the smell. He perched on the edge of the table, swinging his legs. "Jonah says we shouldn't trust you," he announced without preamble, "'cause we don't know nothing about you, and Papa bought you weird." "Bought me weird?" Hannah asked, amused despite herself. "At the town square. Like you were cattle or something. That's weird." Hannah couldn't argue with that logic. "You're right, it was weird, but sometimes life is weird. Are you gonna leave? Like—" He stopped himself, but Hannah knew what he'd been about to say. "Like Mama did." "I'm not planning on it," Hannah said carefully. "But I can't predict the future. No one can. All I can do is tell you I'm here now, and I'd like to help if you'll let me." Caleb studied her with eyes too old for his 9 years. "Jonah says you probably can't cook anyway." Hannah smiled. "Well, we're about to find out. Those biscuits should be ready." She pulled them from the oven, golden and perfect, and set them on the table. Caleb grabbed one immediately, juggling it between his hands because it was so hot. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and then grinned. "These are way better than Jonah's rocks," he declared, and stuffed the rest in his mouth. When Cole came back from checking the cattle, full darkness had fallen, and the kitchen glowed with lamplight. The table was set for 6. Hannah had found plates, somewhat mismatched, and laid them out with care. A pot of beans simmered on the stove, flavored with onions and a bit of salt pork she'd found in the cold box. The biscuits were piled high on a platter. Cole stopped in the doorway, and Hannah watched something break open in his expression. Not quite grief, not quite relief, but something in between, like a man glimpsing what home used to feel like. "I rang the bell," Hannah said quietly. "I hope that was all right." "More than all right," Cole said roughly. He called up the stairs. "Kids, supper." They came tumbling down, all except Eli, who descended the stairs like a ghost, silent and watchful. Jonah came last, his face set in hard lines, determined not to be impressed. They settled around the table, an awkward silence falling. Hannah realized they were waiting for something, and then she saw Millie reach for Jonah's hand and Noah reach for Cole's. "We hold hands and say grace," Cole explained, "before every meal." Hannah took her place at the table, not at the head, that was Cole's place, but beside Millie, and joined the circle of hands. Caleb's palm was sticky, probably from the biscuit he'd snuck earlier. Millie's was tiny and warm. Cole bowed his head. "Lord, we thank you for this food and for the hands that prepared it. We thank you for keeping us safe another day, and we ask that you watch over this house and everyone in it. Amen." "Amen," the children chorused. Then chaos erupted as hands released and children reached for food. Noah managed to knock over his cup, thankfully empty. Millie dropped a biscuit on the floor and declared it still good. Caleb loaded his plate with 3 times more food than he could possibly eat. Only Jonah sat still, staring at Hannah with open hostility. "Jonah," Cole said quietly, "eat your supper." "I'm not hungry." "Boy." Jonah's jaw clenched, but he picked up his fork and stabbed at his beans with unnecessary force. Hannah pretended not to notice, focusing instead on helping Millie cut her biscuit and keeping Noah from drowning his beans in molasses. The meal unfolded in fits and starts, punctuated by Caleb's endless questions and the twins' chatter. Only Eli remained silent, eating mechanically, his eyes distant. When the last biscuit was gone and the beans scraped clean, Cole leaned back in his chair and looked at Hannah across the table. In the lamplight, his face was softer than it had been in the harsh sun of the town square. "That was the best meal we've had in 3 years," he said simply. "It was just beans and biscuits," Hannah protested. "It was more than that." Cole's voice held a weight Hannah didn't quite understand. "Thank you." Later, after the dishes were washed and the children sent to bed, Noah and Millie protesting, Caleb negotiating for one more story, Eli disappearing without a word, Hannah stood on the front porch and looked out at the darkness. The stars here were different than in town, brighter, closer, like she could reach up and touch them. The door opened behind her and Cole stepped out, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered her one. "Thought you might need this." he said. First days are always hard. Hannah accepted the cup, wrapping her hands around its warmth. Your children are wonderful. Cole's laugh was short and humorless. They're a mess. We all are. We're all messes, Hannah said. Some of us just hide it better than others. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee, listening to the night sounds, crickets singing, a horse nickering in the barn, the wind moving through the grass. I meant what I said, Cole finally spoke. You won't be judged here. Whatever brought you to that town square today, whatever people said you lacked, it doesn't matter to me. You're here now. That's enough. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Why are you being kind to me? Because someone was kind to me once, when I needed it most, Cole said simply. And because I think you've had enough cruelty for one lifetime. Hannah looked at him then, really looked at this man who'd bought her for a single silver dollar and was offering her something she'd thought she'd lost forever. The possibility of mattering to someone, of having worth beyond her broken body. I'll stay, she whispered. As long as you'll have me, I'll stay. Cole's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezed once, a promise, a welcome, a new beginning, and then let go. Then welcome home, Hannah Creston, he said, such as it is. And for the first time in 3 years, Hannah believed that maybe, just maybe, home was still possible. Dawn broke over the Mercer Ranch like a promise Hannah wasn't sure she deserved. She woke to unfamiliar sounds. A rooster crowing, boots thumping downstairs, children's voices already rising in argument. For a moment, she lay still in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling beams, trying to convince herself that yesterday had actually happened, that she'd really been sold in a town square, that a stranger had really brought her home. But the wildflowers on the dresser, more wilted now, proved it was real. Hannah rose and dressed quickly in the same faded blue dress, the only one she owned. Her reflection in the small mirror showed dark circles under her eyes and hair that had escaped its braid during the night. She looked like what she was, a woman starting over with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination not to be broken any further. Downstairs, she found chaos already in full bloom. Noah was under the kitchen table making explosion sounds while Millie shrieked at him to stop. Caleb sat on the counter, eating what looked like a raw potato. Jonah stood at the stove, violently stirring something in a pot that was giving off smoke. It's supposed to be oatmeal, he said without turning around, his voice defensive. But the stupid stuff keeps sticking. Maybe because you've got the heat too high, Hannah said gently, crossing to the stove. May I? Jonah's shoulders went rigid. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse, but then he stepped aside, shoving the wooden spoon at her with more force than necessary. Fine. You fix it then. Hannah moved the pot off the direct heat and added a splash of water, stirring until the oatmeal loosened. It was salvageable, barely. She added a pinch of salt and a spoonful of molasses she'd found in the pantry last night. Where's your father? She asked. Out with the cattle already, Jonah said, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. He leaves before sunrise most mornings. Doesn't get back till after dark sometimes. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Hannah glanced at him, really looked at this boy who was trying so hard to be a man. He had Cole's strong jaw and dark hair, but his eyes held an anger that made him look older than 12. That must be hard, Hannah said quietly. Taking care of everyone while he's gone? We managed just fine. The words were clipped, designed to end the conversation. Hannah nodded and turned her attention back to the oatmeal. Millie, Noah, come wash your hands. Caleb, that potato is for cooking, not eating raw. And someone needs to find Eli. Eli never comes down for breakfast, Caleb said, tossing the potato from hand to hand. He hides in his room till everyone else leaves. Hannah's heart squeezed, but she kept her voice light. Well, maybe today will be different. Caleb, would you go tell him breakfast is ready? Caleb shrugged and disappeared upstairs. Hannah heard his feet pounding down the hallway, then his voice calling through a door. Eli, lady says breakfast is ready. She's making the oatmeal not burnt. Silence. Then Caleb's feet pounding back down. He's not coming, he announced, climbing back onto the counter. Hannah divided the oatmeal into bowls, setting them around the table. The twins scrambled into their chairs, still bickering about something involving a toy horse. Jonah remained standing, watching Hannah with suspicious eyes. "You're not eating?" she asked him. "I said I'm not hungry." "You said that last night too, but you ate 3 helpings of beans." Something flickered across Jonah's face, surprise maybe that she'd noticed. "That's different. I was hungry then." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "You're 12 years old and growing. You're hungry now too. But you don't want to admit that I can cook anything worth eating because that would mean accepting that I'm here. Am I close?" Jonah's jaw dropped slightly. The twins stopped fighting to stare at Hannah with wide eyes. "I'll tell you what," Hannah continued, spooning oatmeal into a bowl. "I'm going to put this bowl here. You can eat it or not eat it. That's your choice. But I'm not going to pretend you're not hungry just to spare your pride." She set the bowl at an empty place at the table and turned her attention to cutting bread for the twins. Behind her, she heard the scrape of a chair being pulled out, heard the clink of a spoon against ceramic, heard Jonah eating, grudgingly, but eating nonetheless. It was a small victory, but Hannah would take it. After breakfast, which the twins ate while somehow managing to get oatmeal in their hair, on their faces, and inexplicably on the ceiling, Hannah tackled the mountain of laundry she'd noticed yesterday. The twins disappeared outside, their voices fading as they raced toward the barn. Caleb followed, announcing he was going to catch a lizard. Jonah vanished without a word, probably to do chores. Hannah found the washboard and tub behind the house, along with lye soap that was so harsh it would strip the skin from her hands by day's end. But she'd done this work before, knew the rhythm of it. Scrub, rinse, wring, hang. Scrub, rinse, wring, hang. The sun climbed higher and sweat began to trickle down her spine. She was wrestling with a particularly stubborn grass stain on one of Caleb's shirts when a shadow fell across her work. Hannah looked up to find Eli standing a few feet away, thin as a reed in clothes that hung too loose on his frame. He didn't speak, just stood there watching her with those haunted eyes. "Hello, Eli," Hannah said, keeping her voice soft. "I saved you some oatmeal. It's on the stove if you want it." The boy's gaze dropped to the ground. For a moment, Hannah thought he'd run. Instead, he crept closer, moving like something wild that might bolt at any sudden movement. Do you need help?" His voice was so quiet, Hannah had to strain to hear it. "I could always use help," she said, gesturing to the basket of dirty clothes. "You know how to hang laundry?" Eli nodded, still not quite meeting her eyes. "Then you can hand me the clothes from the basket, and after I wash them, you can help me hang them on the line. How's that sound?" Something that might have been relief crossed the boy's face. He picked up a shirt, one of Cole's work shirts, massive in his small hands, and held it out to her. They worked in silence for nearly an hour. Eli never spoke unless Hannah asked him a direct question, and even then his answers were 1 or 2 words at most. But he stayed. He helped, and when Hannah's hands started to crack and bleed from the harsh soap, he disappeared and came back with a tin of salve that smelled like mint and beeswax. "Mama's," he whispered, pressing it into Hannah's hands. She used it for when her hands hurt. Hannah's throat tightened. This small offering felt more precious than gold. "Thank you, Eli. That's very kind." Eli ducked his head, a flush spreading across his cheeks. Then, so quietly Hannah almost missed it. "You're welcome." By midday, the laundry was flapping on the line like surrender flags, and Hannah's back ached from bending over the washboard. She went inside to find something to make for lunch and discovered her morning work had already been undone. The kitchen floor she'd scrubbed last night was muddy with boot prints. Dirty cups littered the counter. Someone had spilled what looked like milk across the table and left it to dry. Hannah stood in the doorway, taking it in. She could feel frustration building in her chest. Not anger exactly, but the tired recognition that this wasn't going to be easy. That she couldn't clean something once and expect it to stay clean. That living with 5 children meant accepting a certain level of chaos. She rolled up her sleeves and started again. She was on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor when Boots appeared in her line of vision. Hannah looked up to find Jonah standing in the doorway, a dead rabbit hanging from one hand. "Caught this," he said, his voice neutral. "Thought you might know how to cook it." It wasn't an apology for the mess, wasn't an acknowledgement that he and his siblings had already undone her work. But the rabbit was an offering of sorts, Hannah realized. A test, maybe, to see if she really could do what she'd claimed. I can cook it, Hannah said, sitting back on her heels. But I'll need someone to clean and skin it first. I know how to do that. Jonah's chin lifted slightly, defiant. Mama taught me before she died. Then I'd be grateful for your help, Hannah said. I'm better with cooking than with skinning. Something shifted in Jonah's expression, not quite approval, but a lessening of hostility. I'll do it outside, don't want to make a mess in here. He paused. Since you just cleaned it and all. After he left, Hannah allowed herself a small smile. Progress. Tiny, grudging progress, but progress nonetheless. The rabbit stew that night was rich with carrots and potatoes, the meat tender enough to fall off the bone. Cole came home just as Hannah was pulling biscuits from the oven, and the look on his face when he walked into the kitchen made her stomach flutter in a way she didn't quite understand. It smells like... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. It smells like it used to. The children were already gathered around the table, even Eli, though he sat at the far end and kept his eyes on his plate. Jonah took his seat without being asked, which Hannah counted as another small victory. The twins were relatively clean, having been waylaid by Hannah with washcloths before they could sit down. They joined hands for grace, and this time Hannah didn't feel like quite such an interloper. Cole's voice was steady as he gave thanks, and when he mentioned the blessing of help in hard times, his eyes found Hannah's across the table. Dinner was loud and chaotic, with Caleb telling a long, rambling story about the lizard he'd caught and then lost, and Noah and Millie arguing about whose turn it was to feed the chickens in the morning. Jonah ate 3 helpings without comment, which was comment enough. Even Eli cleaned his plate, though he never joined the conversation. Afterward, as Hannah washed dishes and Cole dried them, he'd insisted on helping, despite her protests. A comfortable silence settled between them. They're warming up to you, Cole said, carefully drying a plate. Faster than I expected. Jonah still hates me, Hannah said. Jonah doesn't hate you. He hates that his mother is gone and you're here instead. That's different. Hannah scrubbed at a stubborn bit of stuck-on food. Is it, though? Cole was quiet for a moment. Yes. Because one of those things he can work through and one he can't. Give him time. How much time did it take you? Hannah asked, then immediately regretted the question. I'm sorry, that's not my business. It's all right. Cole set down the plate he'd been drying. Truth is, I'm still working through it. Sarah, my wife, she was the heartbeat of this place. When she died, it was like the whole ranch held its breath and forgot how to exhale. He looked around the kitchen, at the clean counters and swept floor, at the curtains Hannah had straightened that afternoon. You're teaching us how to breathe again. That's not a small thing. Hannah's hands stilled in the soapy water. I'm just cleaning and cooking. You're doing more than that and you know it. Cole's voice was gentle but firm. Millie smiled today. Real smiled, not the sad smile she's been wearing like a mask for 3 years. Eli came out of his room. Caleb asked me tonight if you were going to stay forever. He paused. Even Jonah ate your cooking without complaining, which is basically a miracle. What did you tell Caleb? Hannah asked. About me staying? I told him that was up to you. Hannah turned to face him, her hands dripping soap suds onto the floor. Cole, I don't have anywhere else to go. You know that. I'm here because you bought me at an auction, not because I chose this. But you're choosing to stay now, Cole said. Every morning you wake up and decide to stay another day. That's a choice, and I'm grateful for it. The weight of his words settled over Hannah like a blanket. She'd been thinking of herself as someone without options, someone backed into a corner. But Cole was right. She could leave if she wanted. Could walk to town and find work as a seamstress or a washerwoman. Could write to her brother in California, beg him to send for her. Could do any number of things. But she didn't want to. I'm choosing to stay, Hannah said softly. Not just because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to. Because your children need me. Because this house needs me. She took a breath. Because maybe I need this too. Cole's hand found hers in the soapy water, and he squeezed gently. Then we're both right where we're supposed to be. The days began to blur together into a rhythm that was exhausting but satisfying. Hannah woke before dawn to start breakfast. She packed lunches for Cole when he rode out to check on the cattle. She braided Millie's hair every morning, a ritual that the little girl guarded fiercely. She listened to Caleb's endless questions about everything from why the sky was blue to whether fish got thirsty. She left plates of food outside Eli's door on the days when he couldn't bring himself to come downstairs, and never made him feel guilty about it. And she navigated around Jonah's anger like a woman crossing a frozen lake, carefully, constantly aware that one wrong step could plunge her into freezing water. 2 weeks after her arrival, Hannah decided to tackle the garden. What had once been someone's pride, Sarah's pride, she assumed, was now a graveyard of dead plants and aggressive weeds. But underneath the neglect, Hannah could see the bones of something beautiful. Raised beds lined with stones. A small greenhouse with half its glass panes broken. An herb garden that might survive if it was properly tended. She spent an entire day clearing weeds, her hands blistering despite the salve Eli had given her. The sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat soaked through her dress. But there was something deeply satisfying about the work, about reclaiming this space from the wilderness. She was wrestling with a particularly stubborn tangle of dead tomato vines when Jonah's voice cut through her concentration. "You're wasting your time." Hannah looked up to find him standing at the garden's edge, arms crossed in his familiar defensive posture. "Maybe," she said, tugging at the vines, "but it's my time to waste." "Nothing grows here anymore," Jonah said flatly. "Mama tried for 3 summers after we moved here to get things to grow right, and it was always a fight. Too hot, too dry, wrong soil, wrong something. Then she died, and it all just—" He made a helpless gesture. "Died with her." Hannah sat back on her heels, studying the boy. "Do you remember helping her in the garden?" Something flickered across Jonah's face. "Sometimes. When I was little before the other kids were born, she'd let me plant seeds and water things." His voice went quiet. "I thought I was so important, like I was really helping." "You were helping," Hannah said gently. "No, I wasn't. I was just a stupid kid playing in the dirt while she did the real work." "Jonah, you want to know what killed my mother?" Jonah's voice suddenly harsh, loud enough to make Hannah flinch. "This place killed her. This ranch. This house. This garden that never grew right. She worked herself to death trying to make it all perfect, trying to keep us all fed and clean and happy, and it killed her." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "So yeah, you cleaning the house and cooking our meals and trying to fix the garden, it's all just going to kill you too. That's what happens here. This place eats women alive." Hannah stood slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt. Every instinct told her to go to this hurting boy, to pull him into a hug, but she knew he'd bolt if she tried. "Your mother didn't die because she worked hard," Hannah said softly. "She died because sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and there's no reason or sense to it. But killing yourself with guilt over something you couldn't prevent? That's not honoring her memory. That's just another kind of dying." Jonah's face crumpled, and for a moment Hannah saw past the anger to the terrified 12-year-old underneath. But then he grabbed control again, shoving the emotion down so hard she could almost hear it lock into place. "You don't know anything about it," he said, his voice thick. "You didn't know her. You don't know us. You're just some woman Papa bought because he needed help, and we're all supposed to pretend like that's normal." "You're right," Hannah said. "I didn't know your mother, and I'm never going to try to replace her. But I'm here, Jonah, and I'm not going anywhere. So you can keep being angry at me, keep pushing me away, keep testing to see if I'll leave. But I'm still going to be here tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that." Jonah stared at her, his chest heaving with emotion he wouldn't let escape. Then he turned and ran, disappearing toward the barn. Hannah returned to her weeding, but her hands were shaking. She'd known Jonah would be the hardest, but understanding that intellectually was different from feeling the full force of his pain and anger directed at her. That evening, Jonah didn't come to dinner. Cole went to find him and came back alone, his face grim. "He's in the hayloft," Cole said. "Says he's not hungry." "He's lying," Millie announced. "Jonah's always hungry. He just doesn't want to see Miss Hannah." "Millie," Cole warned. What? It's true. He told me she's trying to replace Mama, and we shouldn't let her. The words hung in the air like smoke. Noah looked up from his plate, his small face worried. Caleb stopped mid-chew. Even Eli, quiet Eli, glanced up with something like alarm in his eyes. Your brother is hurting, Cole said carefully, and sometimes when people hurt, they say things they don't mean. But Miss Hannah isn't trying to replace your mother. Nobody could do that. Mama was the best, Noah said loyally. She was, Cole agreed. But that doesn't mean Miss Hannah isn't good too. Different, but good. You understand? The twins nodded uncertainly. Caleb went back to eating, but Hannah caught the look on Eli's face, a mix of confusion and something that might have been guilt. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the children sent to bed, Hannah found Cole on the porch again. It was becoming their ritual, these quiet conversations under the stars. I'm making things worse, Hannah said without preamble. With Jonah. No, you're not. You're forcing him to face something he's been avoiding for 3 years. Which is? That life goes on, Cole said heavily. That the world keeps turning even after the worst thing happens. That we have to keep living even when we don't want to. He leaned against the porch railing, staring out at the darkness. When Sarah died, Jonah wanted to die too. I know because I felt the same way. But we had 4 other children depending on us, so we couldn't. We had to keep breathing, keep moving, keep pretending we were okay even though we were broken inside. And then I showed up, Hannah said. And then you showed up, and suddenly we're not just surviving anymore. We're living again. The house is clean. The meals are hot. Millie's hair is braided. And Jonah's realizing that maybe, just maybe, it's okay to be happy again. And that terrifies him. Because if he lets himself be happy, if he lets himself care about you, then he's betraying his mother's memory. Hannah's eyes stung with tears. How do I show him that's not true? You can't, Cole said gently. He has to figure it out himself. All you can do is keep showing up, keep being steady, keep proving that you're not going anywhere. What if he never accepts me? Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But Hannah? I don't think it's going to come to that. Jonah's angry, but he's not stupid. He sees what you're doing for his siblings. He sees how much lighter I am since you came. He just needs time to let go of his anger, and time is the one thing we've got plenty of. 3 days later, disaster struck. Hannah woke to Millie's screaming, not the playful shrieking of a child at play, but a sound of pure terror that sent ice shooting through Hannah's veins. She was out of bed and running before she was fully awake, her bare feet pounding down the hallway. She found Millie in her bed, thrashing and crying, her small body burning with fever. The sheets were soaked with sweat, and her eyes, when they opened, were glassy and unfocused. Mama, Millie whimpered. Mama, it hurts. Hannah pressed her hand to Millie's forehead and felt her heart drop. The child was on fire. Cole, Hannah shouted, already pulling back the covers. Cole, get the doctor! Cole appeared in the doorway in his nightshirt, his hair wild from sleep. One look at Millie, and his face went white. Oh, God, he breathed. Not again. Please, not again. Get the doctor, Hannah repeated, keeping her voice steady even though her hands were shaking. Right now, Cole, go. Cole ran. Hannah heard his boots on the stairs, heard the front door bang open, heard the thunder of horse hooves as he raced toward town. Millie's eyes rolled back and she started to convulse. Hannah had seen this before, years ago, when a neighbor's child had contracted scarlet fever. It moved fast, burned hot, and killed more children than it spared. Her hand shook as she gathered Millie into her arms, the child's body rigid with seizures. Jonah! Hannah called. I need cold water and cloths, now! Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and Jonah appeared with Caleb and Noah behind him. All 3 boys were pale, their eyes wide with fear. Is Millie dying? Noah whispered, and the question hung in the air like a blade. No, Hannah said firmly, but I need your help. Jonah, get me the coldest water you can find and as many clean cloths as possible. Caleb, wake Eli and make sure he stays in his room. I don't want him catching this. Noah, you go with Caleb. None of you come near this room until I say. Understand? They nodded and scattered. Hannah turned her attention back to Millie, who had stopped seizing but was now making a horrible rattling sound in her chest. "Stay with me, sweetheart," Hannah murmured, smoothing the damp curls back from Millie's burning forehead. "You stay with me, you hear? You've got to fight this." Jonah returned with a basin of water and an armful of rags. His face was carefully blank, but his hands trembled as he set them down. "Is she—" He couldn't finish the question. "She's going to be fine," Hannah said with a confidence she didn't feel. "But you need to let me work. Go check on your brothers." Jonah hesitated, staring at his little sister's flushed face. "She looks like Mama did, right before—" He swallowed hard. "Right before she died." Hannah looked up at this boy who'd been carrying too much for too long. "Jonah, listen to me. Your mother's death was not your fault, and whatever happens here tonight is not your fault either. Do you understand? But if I'd been better, if I'd helped more, maybe Mama wouldn't have—" "Stop!" Hannah's voice was sharp enough to cut through his spiraling panic. "Your mother died because she got sick, not because you didn't help enough. And Millie is going to live because we're going to fight for her. But I need you to be strong right now. Can you do that?" Jonah nodded jerkily. "Good. Then go watch your brothers. Make sure they don't come in here. And when your father comes back with the doctor, send them up immediately." After Jonah left, Hannah set to work. She stripped Millie's sweat-soaked nightgown and replaced it with a clean one. Then she began the slow, steady work of cooling the fever, dipping cloths in cold water, laying them across Millie's forehead, her chest, her arms. As soon as a cloth grew warm from the heat radiating off the child's skin, Hannah would replace it with a fresh one. Millie drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for her mother, sometimes for her father, once whimpering Hannah's name. Each time Hannah would lean close and murmur reassurances, promises, prayers. The minutes crawled past like hours. Hannah's back began to ache from bending over the bed. Her arms grew heavy from wringing out cloths. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because this child, this precious little girl with the wild blonde curls and the laugh like sunlight, had become hers in a way Hannah couldn't quite explain. She hadn't given birth to Millie, would never give birth to anyone. But in this moment, dipping cloth after cloth in cold water, fighting death with nothing but stubborn determination and wet rags, Hannah understood something. Motherhood wasn't about what your body could do. It was about what your heart chose to claim as its own. And her heart had claimed Millie Mercer. Dawn was breaking when Cole finally returned with the doctor, a stern-faced man with gray whiskers and tired eyes. He took one look at Millie and his expression grew grave. "Scarlet fever," he confirmed, after checking her pulse and peering at her throat. "High fever, the rash on her chest, the red tongue. No doubt about it." "Can you help her?" Cole's voice was raw with fear. "I can give her something for the fever, but—" The doctor pulled a brown bottle from his bag. "Mr. Mercer, you know as well as I do that scarlet fever in one this young, the odds aren't good. You should prepare yourself." "No." The word came from Hannah, sharp and absolute. "No, we're not preparing for anything except her recovery." The doctor looked at her with something like pity. "Ma'am, I understand you want to hope, but—" "But nothing." Hannah stood, her wet dress clinging to her legs, her hair wild around her face. "That child is going to live. I don't care what the odds are. She's going to live." The doctor exchanged a glance with Cole. "Ma'am, faith is admirable, but—" "Get out," Hannah said quietly. "I beg your pardon?" "Leave your medicine and get out. If you're here to pronounce death sentences, we don't need you. I'll fight this fever myself." The doctor's face flushed. "Mr. Mercer, your wife needs to understand—" "She's not my wife," Cole said, but his voice held no correction in it, only a weary acknowledgement. "And she's right. If you can't help, then leave the medicine and go." After the doctor left, indignant and sputtering, Cole sagged against the doorframe. "Hannah, what if he's right? What if she's too sick?" Hannah wrung out another cloth and laid it gently across Millie's burning forehead. "Then I'll sit here and fight until there's nothing left to fight for. But I'm not giving up on her, Cole. I can't." Cole's eyes were wet. "Why? You barely know her. Why would you—" "Because she's mine," Hannah said simply. They're all mine. Your children became mine the moment I stepped foot in this house, and I don't give up on what's mine. Cole crossed the room and pulled Hannah into a fierce hug. She stiffened for a moment. They'd never touched beyond his hand squeezing hers, but then she relaxed into it, letting herself draw strength from his solid presence. Thank you, he whispered into her hair, for fighting for her, for all of them. Go check on the others, Hannah said, pulling back gently. Make them breakfast. Keep them busy. And don't let them see how scared you are. Cole nodded and left, and Hannah returned to her vigil. The day passed in a haze of fever dreams and cold cloths. Millie's temperature would drop slightly, and Hannah would dare to hope. Then it would spike again, and terror would claw at her throat. Outside the window, she could hear the normal sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing, chickens clucking, the boys' voices as they did their chores, life continuing despite the battle being waged in this small bedroom. Night fell again. Hannah lit lamps and kept working. Her hands were raw from the water, and exhaustion made her movements clumsy. But she didn't stop. Cole brought her food that she didn't eat, brought her coffee that she didn't drink. He sat with her for hours in silence, holding Millie's small hand, whispering to her about all the things they'd do when she got better. Around midnight, Millie's fever spiked so high that Hannah thought her heart would stop from sheer terror. The child's body went rigid again, and a horrible rasping sound came from her throat. No, Hannah breathed. No, no, no. Millie, stay with me. You stay with me, baby. She worked faster, changing cloths every few seconds, spooning the doctor's medicine between Millie's cracked lips, singing lullabies her own mother had sung to her a lifetime ago. Cole knelt beside the bed, his face buried in his hands, and Hannah heard him praying, desperate, broken prayers that tore at her heart. The hours stretched toward dawn. Millie's breathing grew shallower, her lips turned blue. Hannah felt panic clawing at her throat, felt the certainty of failure looming. Please, she whispered, not even sure who she was talking to, God, the universe, Millie herself. Please don't take her, please. And then, as the first light of dawn touched the window, Millie's eyes fluttered open. Mama? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Hannah's breath caught. Cole lifted his head, hope and heartbreak warring on his face. I'm here, sweetheart, Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. I'm right here. Millie's small hand found Hannah's. You didn't leave. Never, Hannah promised. I'll never leave you. Millie's eyes drifted closed again, but this time her breathing was easier, deeper. The fever, when Hannah checked it, had finally broken. Cole let out a sob of relief and dropped his head to the bed, his shoulders shaking. Hannah sagged in her chair, 24 hours of fighting suddenly catching up with her all at once. Her vision blurred. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. But Millie was alive, breathing, sleeping peacefully for the first time in 2 days. They'd won. Over the next week, Millie recovered slowly but steadily. Her appetite returned. Her color came back. The angry red rash faded from her chest. And every morning, she woke asking for Mama. Not her mother in heaven, but Hannah. The woman who'd fought death itself to keep her alive. The other children noticed. Jonah especially noticed. Hannah would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not anger anymore, but something more complicated. Something that looked almost like grudging respect. One evening, as Hannah was hanging fresh sheets on the line, Jonah appeared beside her. She would have died, he said without preamble. If you hadn't been here, Millie would have died. Hannah didn't deny it. Maybe. The doctor said she would. He told Papa there was no hope. The doctor was wrong. Jonah was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm sorry for how I've been. Hannah set down the sheet she was holding and turned to face him. Jonah, you don't have to apologize for grieving your mother. I'm not grieving, he said, but his voice cracked. I'm angry. I'm so angry all the time, and I don't even know who I'm angry at anymore. God? The world? Myself? All of those are reasonable, Hannah said gently. But it's not fair to you. Jonah's eyes were wet. You saved Millie's life. You've been taking care of all of us, and I've been nothing but nasty to you. Mama would be... His voice broke completely. Mama would be ashamed of me. Hannah reached out slowly, giving Jonah time to pull away. When he didn't, she pulled him into a hug. He stiffened for a moment, then collapsed against her, finally letting himself cry. Great, gasping sobs that shook his whole body. "Your mother wouldn't be ashamed," Hannah said, holding this boy who was trying so hard to be a man. "She'd understand. She'd be proud of how you've kept your family together. She'd be grateful that you love her enough to be angry at losing her." "I miss her so much," Jonah choked out. "I know, and you're always going to miss her. That's okay. Missing her doesn't mean you can't also accept that I'm here now. There's room in your heart for both." They stood like that for a long time, Hannah holding Jonah while he cried out 3 years of grief and rage and guilt. When he finally pulled away, his face was red and blotchy, but something had shifted in his eyes. The wall he'd been building between them had cracked. "Okay," he said, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Okay, you can stay." Hannah laughed despite herself. "Thank you for your permission." A ghost of a smile crossed Jonah's face. "And you can use Mama's recipes if you want. They're in a book in the kitchen. I've been hiding it because I didn't want you to have them, but that's stupid. She'd want them to be used." "I'd be honored," Hannah said softly. That night, when the family gathered for dinner, something was different. Jonah sat at the table without being asked. He helped serve the younger children without being reminded. And when they joined hands for grace, he squeezed Hannah's fingers gently. A small gesture, but one that meant everything. After dinner, as Hannah tucked Millie into bed, the little girl looked up at her with serious eyes. "Are you my mama now?" she asked. Hannah's throat tightened. "I'm your Hannah, but if you want to call me mama, that would be the greatest honor of my life." Millie smiled, snuggling into her pillow. "Okay, mama, will you sing the song? The one you sang when I was sick?" Hannah sang, her voice soft in the lamplight, and one by one, the other children drifted to the doorway to listen. Even Eli, who crept in silently and sat on the floor beside the bed. When the song ended, Hannah looked up to find Cole watching from the hallway, his eyes suspiciously bright. That night, on the porch under the stars, Cole said, "They're yours now, completely, utterly yours. You know that, right?" Hannah nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. "And Cole stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Hannah, I never expected this. Never thought I'd feel, never thought we'd become a family?" Hannah supplied softly. "Yes," Cole breathed. "A family. Different than before, but real. So real." And in the darkness, with the sound of the children sleeping safely inside, Hannah felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Not for children of her own womb, but for something equally precious, a family that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen them. The woman they'd said couldn't give children had become mother to 5 who desperately needed her. And that, Hannah was beginning to understand, was its own kind of miracle. The morning Hannah woke to silence, she knew something was wrong. In the 6 weeks since Millie's recovery, the Mercer house had become a symphony of noise, boots thundering downstairs, children arguing over breakfast, the twins' endless chatter, Caleb's questions that started before the sun was fully up. Silence meant illness or mischief, and Hannah had learned to fear both equally. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find Cole standing in the kitchen, still in his work clothes from the night before, staring at a piece of paper in his hands. His face was ashen. "Cole? What's happened?" He looked up, and Hannah saw something she'd never seen in his eyes before. Pure, undiluted fear. "It's from Sarah's parents, the Montgomerys." His voice was flat, carefully controlled. "They're coming here. Tomorrow. They want to see the children." Hannah's stomach dropped. She'd heard about the Montgomerys from the children's scattered comments. Wealthy ranchers from Texas who'd never approved of their daughter marrying a dirt farmer and moving to New Mexico. They hadn't attended Sarah's funeral, hadn't written in 3 years, had sent no money or support despite their considerable means. "Why now?" Hannah asked. Cole's jaw clenched. "Because someone in town wrote to them. Told them I'd bought a woman at auction. Told them the children were being raised by a barren woman of questionable morals." He crushed the paper in his fist. "They're threatening to petition the territorial court for custody. They say I'm unfit, that the children are living in squalor, that you're. He stopped, unable to finish. That I'm what? That you're my whore, Cole said bluntly. That I'm teaching the children immoral behavior by keeping you here unmarried. The words hit like a slap. Hannah gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. But we're not. I know that. You know that. But to the Montgomerys, to the court, it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what looks true. Cole sank into a chair, suddenly looking 10 years older. And what looks true is that 6 weeks after buying you at auction, you're living in my house, sleeping under my roof, and calling my children yours. Hannah's mind raced. Can they do that? Can they really take the children? They have money and influence. I have a struggling ranch and a reputation that's apparently been shredded by town gossip. Cole's voice was bitter. Yes, they can probably do exactly that. Footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Jonah stood in the doorway, his face pale. I heard what you said, about Mama's parents, about them taking us away. Jonah, Cole started. No. The boy's voice was sharp. You don't get to protect me from this. Are they really going to take us? Take us away from Hannah? The way he said it, away from Hannah, not away from home or even away from you, made Hannah's chest ache. I won't let that happen, Cole said. But can you stop it? Jonah pressed. If they go to court, if they have lawyers and money and you don't, can you actually stop them? Cole's silence was answer enough. Jonah turned to Hannah and she saw panic in his eyes, the same panic she'd seen when Millie was burning with fever. You can't let them take us. You can't. Eli will stop talking again. The twins will cry every night. Caleb will... His voice broke. Please. You saved Millie. You can save us from this too. Jonah, I don't know how... You'll figure it out. His voice was desperate, certain. You always figure it out. The weight of his faith in her was crushing. After Jonah left to wake his siblings, Hannah turned to Cole. What do we do? Cole looked at her for a long moment, something complicated working behind his eyes. There is one thing that would solve this. One thing that would make it impossible for them to question your place here or claim the children are living in an immoral situation. Hannah's heart began to pound. Cole, marry me, he said quietly. Not for love, not for anything except to protect the children. A legal marriage that puts you beyond reproach, that makes you their stepmother in the eyes of the law. The proposal, if it could even be called that, hung between them like smoke. Hannah's mind whirled. Marriage. To a man she'd known for 6 weeks, a man she barely understood, whose grief was still as present as his children's laughter. A man who was offering her a legal protection, not a partnership. You don't have to answer now, Cole said, misreading her silence. I know it's asking too much. I know you didn't come here to be trapped in a marriage of convenience. It's not too much, Hannah interrupted. It's the most anyone's ever offered me. But Cole, what about you? You loved your wife. You still wear your wedding ring. How can you marry someone else when I'm still in love with a ghost? Cole's smile was sad. Hannah, I'll probably always love Sarah. She was my first love, the mother of my children, but she's gone. And the truth is, these past 6 weeks with you here, I felt alive again. Not the same as before, but alive in a different way. Like maybe there's a future worth building instead of just a past worth mourning. That's not love, Hannah said softly. No, Cole agreed. But it's something. And right now, something is enough. The question is whether it's enough for you. Hannah thought about the children upstairs. Jonah with his hard-won trust, Millie, who called her mama, Eli, who'd finally started speaking in full sentences, Caleb with his endless questions, Noah with his boundless energy. She thought about the house that had slowly transformed from a grief-stricken shell into a home. She thought about the garden she'd been nursing back to life, the tomato plants that were finally showing green shoots. She thought about being sold at auction for a single silver dollar, about her father's disgust, about the town's mockery, about being told her whole life that her worth was tied to her womb and her womb was broken. Here, she was worth something. Here, she mattered. Yes, Hannah said. I'll marry you. Cole's eyes closed briefly in relief. Thank you. But Cole, if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. We need witnesses, we need it legal and documented, and we need to make this house spotless before the Montgomerys arrive. If they're looking for evidence that the children are living in squalor, we can't give them any ammunition. Cole nodded, already standing. I'll ride to town today, talk to Reverend Blackwood about performing the ceremony. We can do it tonight, get the license filed tomorrow morning before the Montgomerys arrive. And I'll make sure this house shines, Hannah said. If they're going to judge us, at least they'll see that the children are clean, fed, and loved. The word hung in the air between them, loved, because whatever this marriage would be, loveless it was not. They might not be in love with each other, but the love for these 5 children was enough foundation to build on. The day passed in a blur of frantic activity. Hannah marshaled the children like a general commanding troops. Every surface was scrubbed, every window washed, every piece of clothing mended and pressed. The children, sensing the seriousness of the situation, worked without complaint. Even the twins, usually human tornadoes of chaos, helped fold laundry with careful concentration. "Why are we cleaning so much?" Millie asked, standing on a chair to reach the high shelves. "We already cleaned last week." Hannah hesitated, unsure how much to tell them, but then she remembered Jonah's face that morning, the way he'd demanded not to be protected from the truth. "Your grandparents are coming," Hannah said. "Your mother's parents, and they're going to be checking to make sure you're all being taken care of properly." "But we are being taken care of," Caleb said, confused. "You take care of us all the time." "I know, sweetheart, but they don't know that, so we need to show them." "What if they don't like you?" Noah asked, his small face worried. "What if they try to make you leave?" Hannah knelt down to his level. "Then I'll fight to stay, because you're my family now, and families stick together." Eli, who'd been quietly dusting the bookshelf, spoke up in his soft voice. "Papa said you're going to marry him. Is that true?" Hannah's breath caught. She hadn't realized Cole had told the children. "Yes, we're getting married tonight." "So you'll be our mama for real?" Millie's voice was small, hopeful, terrified of disappointment. "I'm already your mama for real," Hannah said gently. "The marriage just makes it official in the eyes of the law." "Will you wear Mama's dress?" The question came from Jonah, who'd appeared in the doorway. His voice was careful, neutral, but Hannah heard the test underneath. This was the final boundary, whether she would try to literally step into Sarah's place. "No," Hannah said firmly. "I would never presume to wear your mother's dress. That belongs to her memory. I'll wear my regular dress, and I'll be grateful for the chance to marry your father and become your legal mother, but I will never try to erase your real mother. She was here first. She loved you first. Nothing changes that." Jonah's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Okay, good." That evening, just after sunset, Hannah stood in her small room and stared at her reflection. Her dress was clean but faded, her hair brushed and braided simply. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd been working all day, tired and nervous and completely unprepared for marriage. A soft knock on the door made her turn. Millie stood there holding something wrapped in faded cloth. "Mama?" The name still sent a thrill through Hannah every time. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Millie crossed the room and carefully unwrapped the cloth, revealing a delicate hair comb made of silver studded with small turquoise stones. "This was my real mama's. She wore it on special days. Papa gave it to me after she died, said I should save it for when I got married someday." She held it out to Hannah with solemn ceremony. "But I want you to wear it tonight, because you're going to be my mama now, and that's special." Hannah's eyes flooded with tears. "Millie, I can't. This is yours from your mother." "My first mama would want you to have it," Millie said with the absolute certainty of a 5-year-old. "She would want me to have a mama to take care of me, and you do that, so she'd want you to wear her pretty comb." Hannah's hands shook as she accepted the comb. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll treasure it always." Millie helped her pin it into her braid, and when Hannah looked in the mirror again, she didn't see a woman who was merely surviving. She saw someone who belonged, someone who mattered. The ceremony was brief and simple, conducted in the Mercer living room with Reverend Blackwood presiding. The children stood as witnesses, scrubbed clean and dressed in their Sunday clothes. Jonah held the family Bible. Caleb couldn't stop fidgeting. The twins clutched each other's hands. Eli stood silent and watchful. Cole wore his cleanest work shirt and had combed his hair back from his face. His hands were rough and calloused when they took Hannah's, but his grip was steady. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Blackwood began, his voice echoing in the quiet house, "we are gathered here in the sight of God, and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words washed over Hannah like water. She heard herself respond at the right moments, heard Cole's deep voice saying his vows. She felt him slide a simple gold band onto her finger, not his wife's ring, but a new one he must have purchased in town that day. "By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I now pronounce you man and wife." Reverend Blackwood closed his Bible with a definitive thump. "You may kiss the bride." Cole's eyes met Hannah's, asking permission. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in to press a chaste kiss to her forehead. Nothing passionate or romantic, but gentle and full of promise. "We're married," Hannah whispered, the reality of it hitting her all at once. "We're married," Cole confirmed, "and now no court in the territory can claim you don't belong here." The children erupted into cheers. Even Jonah smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Millie hugged Hannah's legs, nearly knocking her over. Caleb announced he was starving. Could they eat cake now? Noah started galloping around the room, making wedding march sounds. Only Eli remained still, but when Hannah looked at him, he held something out to her. A small tin cup, dented and worn. "It was Mama's," Eli said quietly. "Her favorite cup. Papa gave it to Jonah after she died, and Jonah gave it to me last year, and now I want you to have it." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Because you're our mama now, too." Hannah accepted the cup with trembling hands, understanding the magnitude of the gift. This family was giving her pieces of Sarah's memory, welcoming her not as a replacement, but as a continuation, as someone worthy of carrying their mother's legacy forward. "I'll take good care of it," Hannah promised, "and of all of you." That night, after the children were in bed and Reverend Blackwood had left with the signed marriage certificate, Hannah sat on the porch with her husband. The word felt strange in her mind. Husband. 6 weeks ago she'd been sold at auction. Now she was married. "Thank you," Cole said into the darkness, "for doing this, for protecting them." "I'm protecting myself too," Hannah admitted. "Without this marriage, the Montgomerys could send me away. Now I'm legally their mother. I have rights." "You've earned those rights 10 times over." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Hannah, I want you to know, this marriage, it's real, legal, and binding. But I'm not going to force anything on you. Your room stays your room. I won't come to you unless you want me to. This is for the children and for the law, but it doesn't have to be more than that unless you want it to be." Hannah turned to look at him, this man who'd shown her nothing but respect since the moment he'd stepped forward at that auction. "What if someday I did want it to be more?" Cole's breath caught. "Then that would be a gift I don't deserve but would treasure." They sat in comfortable silence after that, two people bound by law and circumstance and a growing affection neither quite knew how to name. The Montgomerys arrived at noon the next day in a gleaming black carriage pulled by matching horses, looking like doom come to call. Edwin Montgomery was tall and severe, with a steel-gray beard and eyes like chips of ice. His wife, Patricia, wore a traveling dress that probably cost more than the entire contents of the Mercer house, and her expression suggested she smelled something rotten. Hannah met them at the door, Cole beside her, both dressed in their best clothes and wearing their new wedding rings prominently displayed. "Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery," Cole said, his voice carefully polite. "Thank you for making the journey. May I introduce my wife, Hannah Mercer." The word wife hit the Montgomerys like a physical blow. Patricia's eyes widened. Edwin's face flushed red. "Your wife." Edwin's voice was sharp. "The letter we received said you'd bought some barren woman at auction and were living in sin." "The letter you received was outdated," Hannah interrupted smoothly. "Cole and I were married 3 nights ago by Reverend Blackwood. The certificate is filed with the territorial court. I am the children's legal stepmother." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. "How convenient. A rushed marriage right before our arrival." "Not rushed," Cole said. "Necessary. For the children's sake and for Hannah's protection. Now, would you like to come in and see your grandchildren? They've been looking forward to meeting you." The lie hung in the air. The children had been dreading this meeting, but the Montgomerys couldn't refuse without seeming heartless. Inside, the house gleamed. Every surface shone. Fresh bread sat cooling on the kitchen counter, filling the air with its warm scent. The children stood in a neat line, scrubbed and dressed, looking like something out of a catalog. "Children," Cole said, "these are your grandparents, your mother's parents." An awkward silence fell. The children stared at these strangers who shared their blood, but nothing else. Finally, Jonah stepped forward and extended his hand with painful formality. "Sir, ma'am, it's good to meet you." Edwin shook his grandson's hand, his expression softening slightly. "You've grown. You look like your mother around the eyes." "I know," Jonah said quietly. "Papa tells me that sometimes." Patricia's gaze swept over the other children, cataloging them like livestock. "They seem healthy enough, though I expected them to be better dressed." "These are their good clothes," Hannah said evenly. "We live on a working ranch, Mrs. Montgomery. The children help with chores. Fancy clothes would be impractical." "I see." Patricia's tone suggested she saw quite a bit and disapproved of all of it. The inspection that followed was excruciating. The Montgomerys examined every room, opened every cupboard, ran their fingers along shelves checking for dust. They questioned the children about their schooling, their diet, their daily routines. They looked at Hannah like she was a curiosity at best, an interloper at worst. "Where do you sleep?" Edwin asked Hannah bluntly. "In Cole's room?" "Papa and Mama have their own rooms," Millie piped up before Hannah could answer. "Papa's room is big and Mama's room is small but pretty. She has flowers in a jar." Edwin's eyebrows rose. "Separate rooms? What kind of marriage is that?" "The kind that's none of your business," Cole said, his voice hard. "But since you're so concerned about propriety, let me be clear. Hannah and I are legally married. She is these children's mother in the eyes of the law, and more importantly, in their hearts. If you have concerns about how we run our household, you can voice them, but you cannot come into my home and insult my wife." Patricia's fan snapped open. "We're not insulting anyone. We're simply trying to ascertain whether our daughter's children are being properly cared for." "They are," Hannah said firmly. "They're fed 3 meals a day. They're clean. They're learning their letters and numbers. They help with chores appropriate to their ages. They're loved and protected. What more could you want?" "We want them raised with advantages," Edwin said. "My daughter married beneath her station, moved to this God-forsaken territory, and worked herself to death trying to make do with inadequate resources. I won't see her children suffer the same fate." "Mama didn't work herself to death," Jonah's voice cut through the room like a knife. "She died because she got sick, and we're not suffering. We have everything we need." "You have a stepmother who can't even give you siblings," Patricia said coldly. "A barren woman who was purchased at auction like cattle. What kind of example is that?" The room went deathly silent. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Cole's hands clenched into fists. But before either of them could respond, Eli stepped forward, quiet, shy Eli, who rarely spoke above a whisper. "She saved Millie's life," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "When Millie had scarlet fever and the doctor said she would die, Hannah stayed up for 2 days straight fighting the fever. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She just kept changing cold cloths and forcing medicine down Millie's throat and refusing to let her die." His voice grew stronger. "And she takes care of all of us. She braids Millie's hair every morning. She helps me with my reading. She doesn't get mad when Noah breaks things. She listens to Caleb's questions even when they're annoying. She taught Jonah that it's okay to miss Mama and still be happy now." Tears were streaming down Eli's face, but he didn't stop. "I don't care if she can't have babies. She's the best mama we could have, and if you try to take us away from her, I'll—" He faltered, unable to think of a threat big enough. "I'll hate you forever." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia's face had gone pale. Edwin cleared his throat uncomfortably. Hannah knelt down and pulled Eli into a fierce hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "That was very brave." When she stood, still holding Eli's hand, she met the Montgomerys' eyes steadily. "You can investigate us all you want. You can hire lawyers and petition courts. But these children are exactly where they belong, with their father and with me. and we will fight you with everything we have to keep them." Edwin and Patricia exchanged a long look, having some silent conversation that Hannah couldn't interpret. Finally, Edwin spoke. "We would like to speak with the children privately, without either of you present." "No," Cole said immediately. "It's not a request," Edwin said. "If you refuse, we'll take it to the territorial court as evidence that you're coaching the children, teaching them what to say." Hannah squeezed Cole's arm. "It's all right. Let them talk to the children. The truth will speak for itself." Cole looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he nodded stiffly. "Fine, but you will not frighten them. You will not make promises you don't intend to keep. And you will not tell them their father and I are unfit. Understood?" "We simply want to understand their situation," Patricia said. Hannah and Cole stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind them. Through the window they could see the Montgomerys settling into chairs, the children arranged before them like prisoners awaiting judgment. "This is bad," Cole said, pacing. "They're going to try to convince the kids they'd be better off in Texas. Promises of money and fancy schools, and the children won't fall for it," Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. "They know where they belong." Inside, through the wavy glass, they watched Edwin talking earnestly to Jonah, watched Patricia trying to draw Millie onto her lap, only to have the little girl step back and shake her head, watched Caleb gesturing animatedly, probably explaining something in exhaustive detail, whether anyone wanted to hear it or not. 30 minutes crawled past like hours. Finally, the door opened and the Montgomerys emerged, their expressions unreadable. "Well?" Cole demanded. Edwin looked at his wife, then back at Cole. "The children speak very highly of Mrs. Mercer. They seem content." "Content?" Hannah felt anger flash through her. "They're not just content, they're loved and they know it." "Yes," Patricia said quietly. "We can see that." She looked genuinely troubled now, all her earlier haughtiness gone. "The thing is, they spoke about you the way our Sarah used to speak about things she loved, with absolute certainty, with joy. It's clear they've bonded with you." "So you'll leave them alone?" Cole asked warily. "We didn't say that," Edwin said. "But we're not going to pursue custody. Not right now. However, we do have concerns that we believe are legitimate." "Such as?" Hannah asked. "Such as the fact that this ranch is struggling financially," Edwin said bluntly. "Such as the fact that you're trying to raise 5 children on inadequate resources. Such as the fact that medical care is hours away and nearly cost you Millie's life." "We manage," Cole said through gritted teeth. "You manage now," Patricia said. "But what happens when another child gets sick? Or when Jonah is ready for proper schooling? Or when the ranch fails completely because you're stretched too thin?" "What are you proposing?" Hannah asked, sensing there was more coming. Edwin pulled out a leather portfolio. "We're proposing financial assistance, not custody. The children clearly want to stay here. But money. Enough to hire help for the ranch so Cole doesn't work himself to death. Enough to ensure the children have proper medical care, proper education, proper opportunities." "We don't want your charity," Cole said stiffly. "It's not charity," Patricia said. "It's an investment in our grandchildren's future. Sarah was our only child. These 5 children are all we have left of her. We may not have been there for them before." Her voice cracked slightly. "We made mistakes. We thought our pride mattered more than family. We were wrong. But we can't change the past. We can only try to do better going forward." Hannah looked at Cole and saw the same war playing out on his face that she felt in her heart. Pride versus practicality. Independence versus the children's needs. "What would you want in return?" Hannah asked. "Quarterly visits," Edwin said, "and updates on the children, letters, photographs if possible. We want to be part of their lives, even from a distance, but we won't interfere in how you raise them. That's your domain." Cole was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "I need to discuss this with my wife." The words "my wife" sent a strange thrill through Hannah, despite everything. After the Montgomerys left, temporarily, to stay at the hotel in town while awaiting an answer, Hannah and Cole gathered in the kitchen. The children had been sent outside to do evening chores, giving them privacy. "We should take the money," Hannah said immediately. I know you don't want to. I know it feels like admitting defeat. But Cole, think about what it could mean. You could hire a ranch hand, maybe two. You wouldn't have to work dawn to dark. You could spend more time with the children. We could afford a real doctor if someone gets sick again. We could buy books for the children, clothes that fit, maybe even— I know, Cole interrupted quietly. I know all of that, and you're right. But Hannah, taking their money means tying ourselves to them forever. It means they'll always have a claim on the children, always have a say. They already have a claim, Hannah pointed out. They're the children's grandparents, and Edwin and Patricia aren't bad people. They're grieving too. They lost their daughter. They want to be part of their grandchildren's lives. Is that really so terrible? Cole sank into a chair, scrubbing his face with his hands. When did you become the voice of reason? About the same time I married a stubborn rancher who's too proud for his own good. Despite everything, Cole laughed. Fair point. He looked up at her, his eyes troubled. What if this changes things? What if having money makes the children think they need the fancy life the Montgomerys could give them in Texas? Hannah sat down across from him, taking his rough hands in hers. Cole, those children don't want fancy. They want you. They want this ranch. They want a home where they feel safe and loved. Money can't buy that, and the Montgomerys know it now. That's why they're offering support instead of fighting for custody. You really think we should accept? I think we should do what's best for the children, Hannah said. And having financial breathing room is what's best. You can't keep working yourself to exhaustion, and I can't keep worrying that one bad season will destroy everything you've built. Cole studied their joined hands for a long moment. When did this become we? This marriage was supposed to be for convenience, for the law, but somewhere along the way, it became real, didn't it? Hannah felt her cheeks flush. Yes, I suppose it did. Good, Cole said softly, because I like the we version better than doing this alone. They accepted the Montgomerys' offer the next morning. Edwin drew up papers, had them legally notarized, and provided the first installment of funds, enough to hire 2 ranch hands immediately and stock the pantry with supplies that would last through winter. Before the Montgomerys left, Patricia pulled Hannah aside on the porch. I misjudged you, the older woman said quietly. When I heard you'd been bought at auction, that you were barren, I assumed the worst. But I was wrong. You're exactly what those children need, what Sarah would have wanted for them, if she couldn't be here herself. Hannah's eyes stung with unexpected tears. Thank you for saying that. Take care of them, Patricia said, and take care of yourself too. Being a mother to 5 children is exhausting work, even with help. Don't lose yourself in the caring for everyone else. After the Montgomerys departed, the ranch seemed to exhale. The children ran wild, releasing the tension they'd been holding. Even Jonah climbed a tree and hung upside down from a branch, something Hannah hadn't seen him do before. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Caleb asked, Are we rich now, since the grandparents gave us money? We're comfortable, Cole said carefully, which is better than rich. Rich people forget what matters. Comfortable people remember to be grateful. I'm grateful for Mama's cooking, Noah announced. Especially her biscuits. I'm grateful we get to stay together, Millie said, looking around the table with serious eyes. That was what I was most scared about, that they'd take us away and we'd never see Mama and Papa again. That's never going to happen, Hannah said firmly. You're stuck with us. Good, Jonah said, and smiled at her, a real, genuine smile that made Hannah's heart soar. That night, after the children were asleep, Hannah stood in her small room and looked at her reflection. She wore a simple nightgown and had let her hair down from its braid. She looked tired, worn from the stress of the past few days, but she also looked alive in a way she hadn't in years. A soft knock on her door made her turn. Come in. Cole entered, still fully dressed, his expression uncertain. I wanted to check on you. Today was hard. Today was necessary, Hannah said, and it turned out better than we had any right to hope. Because of you. Cole stepped further into the room, stopping a respectful distance away. Hannah, I keep trying to figure out how to thank you for everything you've done, for the children, for me, for this family. But words don't seem adequate. You don't need to thank me. This family saved me as much as I saved them. Cole was quiet for a moment, then, I meant what I said on our wedding night, about not forcing anything on you, about letting this marriage be whatever you wanted it to be. But Hannah, he paused, seeming to search for words. I find myself wanting it to be more. Not because of convenience or legality, but because somewhere in these past weeks I've started to fall. Don't, Hannah interrupted, her voice shaking. Don't say it unless you mean it, because Cole, I've already fallen, completely and utterly fallen. For you, for your children, for this life. And if you say you're falling too but don't really mean it, it will break something in me I don't think I can fix. Cole crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, taking her face in his calloused hands. I mean it, he said fiercely. God help me, I mean it. I love you, Hannah. Different from before, different from Sarah, but real and true and terrifying. You make me want to be better, to do better, to build a future instead of just surviving. And I know it's complicated. I know we barely know each other. I know this started as a business arrangement, but Hannah kissed him, cutting off his rambling words. It wasn't like their chaste wedding kiss. This was full of promise, of possibility, of all the things they'd been dancing around for weeks. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. So, he said, his voice rough. Does this mean... It means I love you too, Hannah whispered, and I want this marriage to be real. In every way. Cole's eyes closed briefly in relief and joy. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to being just convenient. I'm sure, Hannah said. I've never been more sure of anything. What followed was tender and awkward and perfect. 2 people learning each other, finding a rhythm that was uniquely theirs. And afterward, lying in Cole's arms in his large bed that had felt too empty for 3 years, Hannah finally understood what it meant to be complete. Not because a man had chosen her, not because children needed her, but because she'd chosen herself, chosen to believe she was worth more than a single silver dollar, more than the working parts of her body, more than the town's judgment. She'd chosen to believe she deserved love. And in choosing that belief, she'd found exactly what she'd been told she could never have: a family, a home, a future. Outside the window, the New Mexico stars blazed in the darkness, and in the garden below, the tomato plants she'd nurtured from near death stretched toward the sky, growing impossible green shoots in soil everyone had said was too poor to sustain life. Some things, Hannah was learning, grew best when everyone else had given up on them. Some things, like love, like family, like faith in your own worth, were miracles that happened not despite the impossible, but because of it. The morning after changed everything and nothing at all. Hannah woke in Cole's bed to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and his arm warm across her waist. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. What would the children think? How would they explain this sudden shift? But then she heard feet thundering down the stairs and Caleb's voice shouting about finding a snake in the chicken coop, and she realized that life on the Mercer Ranch moved too fast for anyone to notice where the adults had spent the night. Cole stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her, a smile spread across his face that was almost boyish in its unguarded joy. "Good morning, wife," he murmured, the word carrying weight it hadn't held before. "Good morning, husband," Hannah replied, and felt heat rise to her cheeks at the intimacy of it. They dressed quickly, separately, falling back into the careful propriety they'd maintained for appearances. But when they met in the hallway, Cole caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, and Hannah knew that everything between them had fundamentally transformed. Downstairs, chaos reigned as usual. The twins were arguing about whose turn it was to gather eggs. Jonah was trying to cook oatmeal again and burning it spectacularly. Eli sat at the table reading a book that was clearly beyond his age level, his lips moving silently as he sounded out difficult words. And Caleb was standing on a chair gesturing wildly as he recounted his encounter with the snake. "It was at least 10 feet long," Caleb declared. "Maybe 20. And it had fangs like this." He made claws with his hands. "It was a garter snake," Jonah said dryly, scraping the burnt oatmeal into the slop bucket. "About a foot long, and completely harmless." "It could have been poisonous," Caleb insisted. "You don't know for sure." Hannah took over the breakfast preparations, gently moving Jonah aside. He didn't protest, just settled at the table with a grateful look. Cole poured coffee, and for a few minutes they moved around the kitchen in a comfortable dance, him reaching for cups at the same moment she reached for the sugar, their shoulders brushing, small touches that felt monumental. "Papa looks happy," Millie observed with a child's blunt honesty. "How come you look so happy today, Papa?" Cole's ears turned red. "I'm always happy, honey." "No, you're not," Millie said. "Usually you look tired happy, like you're happy but also like you want to sleep for a year. But today you look really happy. Did something good happen?" Hannah busied herself with the oatmeal to hide her smile. Cole cleared his throat awkwardly. "I'm just grateful," he said finally, "for all of you, for this family, for—" he glanced at Hannah, "for everything we have." Jonah, who'd been watching this exchange with the knowing eyes of a 12-year-old who wasn't quite as oblivious as adults hoped, said nothing. But Hannah caught the small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth as he bent over his breakfast. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. With the Montgomery money, Cole hired 2 ranch hands, Jake and Pete, brothers from Texas who were hard workers and didn't ask questions about the family's unusual history. Their presence meant Cole could spend more time at the house, could actually eat lunch with the family instead of grabbing cold biscuits while checking fence lines. Hannah watched him transform. The lines around his eyes softened. His laughter came easier. He started joining her on the porch after the children went to bed, and their conversations stretched longer, grew deeper. They talked about everything: his childhood in Missouri, her lonely years with her father, dreams they'd each given up on, hopes they were beginning to dare again. And at night, when the house was dark and quiet, Cole would come to her room, or she to his, and they would learn each other in ways that made Hannah understand why poets wrote about love like it was a religion. But peace on the Mercer Ranch never lasted long. It was Eli who first noticed something wrong. He'd been checking the mail when the weekly post rider came through and returned to the house pale-faced, clutching an official-looking envelope. "Papa," he said quietly. "This came. It's from the territorial court." Hannah watched Cole's face drain of color as he opened the letter. She moved to stand beside him, reading over his shoulder, and felt her stomach drop. The letter was brief and devastating. A formal complaint had been filed against Cole and Hannah Mercer regarding the welfare of the 5 minor children in their care. The complaint alleged that Hannah's presence in the home was morally questionable, given her purchase at auction, that the marriage had been rushed and likely fraudulent, and that the children were being raised in an environment unsuitable for their proper development. A court official would be arriving within the week to conduct a thorough investigation, and temporary custody arrangements might be necessary pending the outcome. The complaint was signed by Martha Simmons, the woman from the quilting circle who tittered behind her hand the day Hannah was sold. "I don't understand," Hannah said, her voice shaking. "We're legally married. The Montgomerys visited and approved. What more do they want?" Cole's hands crumpled the letter. "They want to punish us. The town can't stand that we're happy, that we've built something good out of what they saw as shameful. They need us to fail so they can feel righteous about what they did to you that day. But the children, they can't actually take the children, can they? If they convince the court we're unfit?" Cole's voice was grim. "Yes, they can." Jonah had been standing in the doorway, listening. Now he stepped forward, his young face set in hard lines that made him look far older than 12. "I won't go," he said flatly. "I don't care what any court says. I won't leave here, and I won't let them take Millie or the others either." "Jonas," Cole started. "No, Papa. I'm not a little kid anymore. I can work. I can help. And I can testify in court if I need to. I can tell them that this is the best home we've ever had, that Mama makes us happier than we've been since our real Mama died, that you're a good father and she's a good mother, and anyone who says different is a liar." Hannah crossed to Jonah and pulled him into a fierce hug. "Thank you for that. But sweetheart, adults don't always listen to children, even when children are telling the truth." "Then we make them listen," Jonah said stubbornly. "We don't give up. That's what you taught me, isn't it? When Millie was sick and everyone said she'd die, you didn't give up. You fought. So we fight this too." Cole looked at his son with pride and heartbreak warring on his face. "We will fight. But Jonah, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that fighting might not be enough. Sometimes the world is cruel, and no amount of fighting changes that." "I don't believe that," Jonah said. "Not anymore." I used to think the world was just cruel and that was that. But then Mama, Hannah, came here and showed me that people can choose to be good even when it's hard. So we choose to fight. We choose to keep our family together, and we don't give up. Over the next few days, Hannah threw herself into preparations with the same desperate energy she'd used to fight Millie's fever. The house was cleaned until it sparkled. The children's clothes were mended and pressed. She made lists of their daily routines, their educational progress, their health records. She wrote out menus showing the nutritious meals she prepared. She documented everything, determined to show that the children were thriving. But at night, lying in Cole's arms, she couldn't stop the fear from creeping in. "What if they decide our marriage is a sham?" she whispered. "What if they say it was just for show, to avoid losing the children?" "Then we tell them the truth," Cole said, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "That yes, we married for the children's sake, but that it became real. That I love you, and you love me, and that's not something anyone can legislate away." "Love isn't evidence," Hannah said. "Not to a court. Then we'll find other evidence. We'll get letters of support. We'll have people testify about the children's welfare." "Who?" Hannah's laugh was bitter. "The town that mocked me at that auction? The people who filed this complaint in the first place?" Cole was silent because they both knew she was right. They had few allies in Redemption Hollow. The Montgomerys were too far away to help in time, and the court official coming to judge them was likely already prejudiced by the complaint. The official arrived on a Thursday morning, a thin, severe woman named Mrs. Abigail Thornton, who wore spectacles on a chain and carried a leather-bound notebook everywhere she went. She spent 3 days at the ranch, observing everything with the cold precision of a scientist examining specimens. She watched Hannah cook breakfast and noted the time it took, the portions served, whether the children ate willingly or had to be coerced. She examined the children's sleeping arrangements, measured the square footage of their rooms, checked the cleanliness of their bedding. She questioned each child separately, asking about their daily routines, their relationship with Hannah, whether they felt safe, whether anyone had ever hurt them. The children, to their credit, defended Hannah and Cole fiercely. Even the twins, who had a tendency to say whatever popped into their heads, spoke earnestly about how much they loved their new mama and didn't want anyone to take them away. But Mrs. Thornton's face remained impassive, impossible to read. On the third day, she requested a private meeting with Cole and Hannah in the evening after the children were in bed. They sat in the living room, the lamp casting long shadows, while Mrs. Thornton reviewed her notes with maddening slowness. Finally, she looked up, her expression neutral. "I've completed my investigation," she said, "and I must say, this is one of the most unusual cases I've encountered in 15 years of social work." Hannah's heart hammered against her ribs. Beside her, Cole's hand found hers and gripped tight. "The children are clearly well cared for," Mrs. Thornton continued. "They're clean, adequately fed, and appear to be receiving basic education. The house is maintained to reasonable standards. There are no signs of physical abuse or neglect." "Then the complaint is dismissed?" Cole asked hopefully. "Not quite." Mrs. Thornton's expression remained stern. "While the children's physical welfare is adequate, there are significant concerns about the moral environment in which they're being raised." "What concerns?" Hannah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Mrs. Mercer, you were purchased at a public auction less than 3 months ago. You married Mr. Mercer mere weeks later under circumstances that appear, at minimum, rushed. You have no family in the territory, no references, no history that can be verified. For all intents and purposes, you appeared out of nowhere and inserted yourself into these children's lives." "I was invited into their lives," Hannah said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Cole asked me to stay. The children wanted me to stay." "The children are minors," Mrs. Thornton said. "They don't get to decide what's in their own best interest. That's why the court exists, to protect children from situations that might harm them, even if they don't understand the harm." "What harm?" Cole demanded. "My children are happier than they've been in 3 years. They're thriving. Hannah has given them stability and love and what happens when she leaves?" Mrs. Thornton interrupted. "A marriage contracted under duress, under questionable circumstances, how long will that last? 6 months? A year? And when it inevitably falls apart, these children will experience another devastating loss. They'll learn that women are temporary, that families are fragile, that nothing good lasts. Is that the lesson you want to teach them? The words hit like physical blows. Hannah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Our marriage is not a fraud, she said quietly, and I'm not leaving, ever. Those children are mine in every way that matters, and I would die before I abandoned them. Mrs. Thornton studied her over the rim of her spectacles. You say that now. But Mrs. Mercer, you're a woman who was sold at auction because she cannot bear children. What happens when you realize this life, cooking and cleaning and raising someone else's children, is all you'll ever have? What happens when you look at Mr. Mercer and see not a husband you chose, but a man who bought you? What happens when resentment sets in? That won't happen, Hannah said, but even to her own ears the words sounded defensive. It always happens, Mrs. Thornton said with the weary certainty of someone who'd seen too many families destroyed. Marriages born of desperation rarely survive, and when this one fails, it will be these children who pay the price. She closed her notebook with a definitive snap. I'm recommending to the court that the children be removed from your home and placed in temporary foster care while a more permanent solution is arranged. Given the Montgomerys' expressed interest and financial means, they will likely be awarded custody and the children relocated to Texas. No. Cole's voice was dangerous. You're not taking my children. I don't take children, Mr. Mercer. The court does. And the court acts in their best interest. Their best interest is staying here. Cole was on his feet now, his face flushed. With their father, with their home, with people who love them. Love isn't always enough, Mrs. Thornton said, standing as well. I'll be filing my report tomorrow. You'll receive official notice within the week. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I do believe you both care for these children, but caring isn't the same as providing what they truly need, and what they need is stability, security, and a family structure that isn't built on the shaky foundation of a transaction. After she left, Hannah and Cole sat in stunned silence. The lamp flickered. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. We're going to lose them, Hannah whispered. After everything, we're going to lose them. Cole pulled her against his chest, and she felt his heart racing. No, we're not. I won't let that happen. How can you stop it? The court will rule. They'll send officers. They'll take the children by force if they have to. Then we don't give them the chance. Cole's voice was grim. We leave, tonight. Pack what we can carry and disappear before they can serve the papers. Hannah pulled back to stare at him. Run? Cole, you'd be fugitives. The children would be fugitives. You'd never be able to stop running. Better running than losing them to strangers. Better fugitives than separated. And what kind of life is that? Hannah asked. Always looking over your shoulder? Never settling anywhere? The children deserve better than that. They deserve to stay together, Cole said stubbornly. Hannah stood and paced to the window, staring out at the darkness. Everything in her wanted to agree with Cole, to pack up and run, to fight with every weapon available. But she'd spent her whole life running, from her father's disgust, from the town's judgment, from the reality of her own body's limitations. Running had never solved anything. There has to be another way, she said. Some argument we haven't made, some evidence we haven't presented, something. Like what? The court doesn't care that we love these children. They only care about appearing proper and righteous. A thought struck Hannah like lightning. She turned from the window, her mind racing. What if we give them what they want? She said slowly. What if we prove our marriage isn't a fraud by making it something that would have happened anyway? Something that exists beyond the circumstances that brought us together? Cole frowned. I don't understand. Mrs. Thornton said our marriage is questionable because it was rushed and born of desperation. So we show everyone, that what we have transcends all of that. That we choose each other, not because of the children or the court or circumstances, but because we genuinely love each other. But we do love each other, Cole said, confused. We've been saying that. Saying it isn't enough. We have to prove it in a way the court can't dismiss. Hannah's thoughts were crystallizing into a plan that felt both desperate and perfect. We renew our vows, publicly, with the whole town as witness. We invite Mrs. Thornton, the Montgomerys, everyone who's questioned us. And we don't do it as a legal formality, but as a genuine celebration of choosing each other. We show them that this marriage would exist even if the children didn't. Cole stared at her. Hannah, the town will mock us. They'll say we're putting on a show. Let them. The only people who matter are the ones deciding our children's fate. And if we can show the court that our marriage is built on genuine love, that it's stable and real and not going anywhere, then maybe, just maybe, they'll see that the children are exactly where they belong. It's a long shot, Cole said quietly. It's the only shot we have, Hannah replied. Unless you want to run. Cole was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. You would really do this? Stand in front of the whole town and declare your love for me, knowing they'll judge you, mock you, whisper about you. I'd stand in front of God himself and declare my love for you, Hannah said fiercely, and for our children. Because Cole, this family is everything to me. It's the first real thing I've ever had, and I'm not giving it up without a fight. Cole kissed her then, deep and desperate, and when they broke apart, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. All right, he said, we'll do it your way. We'll throw ourselves a wedding, and we'll invite every judgmental busybody in 3 territories, and we'll show them that what we have is real. Planning a wedding in 4 days while under threat of losing one's children was, Hannah discovered, a special kind of insanity. But she threw herself into it with the same ferocious determination she'd brought to every other battle she'd fought since arriving at the Mercer Ranch. The children, once they understood what was happening, became her eager accomplices. Millie insisted on picking wildflowers for decorations. Caleb appointed himself in charge of invitations, riding into town with handwritten cards and delivering them with solemn importance. Eli, quiet Eli, revealed an unexpected talent for drawing and created a beautiful sign announcing the renewal ceremony. Even the twins helped, though their help mostly consisted of getting underfoot while attempting to tie ribbons on everything that stood still long enough. Jonah, predictably, had questions. But you're already married, he said, watching Hannah iron her best dress, still the faded blue one from the auction, but cleaned and mended until it looked almost respectable. Why do it again? Hannah chose her words carefully, because sometimes people need to see something to believe it. The court thinks we got married for the wrong reasons, so we're showing them we'd marry for the right reasons too. But you did marry for the right reasons, Jonah said, to keep us together. What's more right than that? Hannah's heart squeezed. You're absolutely correct, but sometimes adults are foolish and need things spelled out for them. Adults are stupid, Jonah said with feeling, and stalked off to help Cole set up chairs in the yard. The day of the ceremony dawned bright and clear, the sky that particular shade of blue that only existed in New Mexico. Hannah woke early, her stomach churning with nerves. Today they would stand before everyone who'd ever judged them and declare their love. Today they would gamble everything on the hope that honesty and vulnerability could overcome prejudice. Mrs. Thornton arrived first, her expression skeptical. The Montgomerys came next, having made the journey from Texas when they'd received the invitation, Edwin looking stern, Patricia's eyes suspiciously red like she'd been crying. Then the townsfolk began trickling in, drawn by curiosity, if nothing else. Martha Simmons came with her sister, both wearing expressions of smug anticipation, clearly expecting a spectacle. They were going to get one, Hannah thought grimly, just not the kind they expected. By early afternoon, nearly 50 people had gathered in the Mercer yard. Someone had brought a fiddle. The Montgomerys had contributed food, more food than Hannah had ever seen in one place, laid out on tables beneath the cottonwood trees. The children ran between guests, wild and happy, oblivious to the weight of what was happening. Reverend Blackwood stood beneath an arch that Jonah and Eli had built from willow branches and wild roses. Cole waited there in his Sunday suit, his hands clasped in front of him, his face showing every one of his 30-odd years and every ounce of fear he was feeling. Hannah walked toward him across the grass, wearing her faded blue dress, but with Millie's gift, Sarah's silver hair comb, tucked into her braid. She carried wildflowers the children had picked. Her hands shook, but she kept her chin high. The whispers started immediately. Can't even afford a new dress. Oh, shameful, really. Making a spectacle like this? Mark my words, this won't last 6 months. Hannah heard every word. Let each one strike and bounce off. She kept her eyes on Cole, on the man who'd stepped forward when no one else would, who'd given her back her dignity along with his name. When she reached him, he took her shaking hands in his steady ones. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "I look terrified," Hannah whispered back. "That too, but mostly beautiful." Reverend Blackwood cleared his throat. "We are gathered here today to witness the renewal of vows between Cole Mercer and Hannah Mercer. This couple, married just 3 months ago under circumstances that some might question, have chosen to stand before you all and recommit themselves to each other and to the family they've built together." More whispers. Hannah saw Martha Simmons lean over to say something to her sister, saw several people exchange knowing looks, even Mrs. Thornton's expression remained coldly skeptical. "Cole," Reverend Blackwood said, "would you like to speak first?" Cole cleared his throat, looking out at the gathered crowd. Hannah watched him take a breath, square his shoulders, and become the man she'd fallen in love with, strong, honest, unflinching. "Most of you know my story," he began. 3 years ago, I lost my wife Sarah to illness, lost the woman I'd loved since I was 17, the mother of my children, the heartbeat of my home. And for 3 years after that, I was lost too, just going through the motions. Surviving, but not living. He paused, his eyes finding Hannah's. Then one day I went into town and saw something that made me sick to my stomach. A woman being auctioned like property, being told she was worthless because her body couldn't do what society expected it to do. And I thought about how much Sarah would have hated that, how she would have spit fire at the cruelty of it. So I stepped forward, not because I was looking for a wife, but because I couldn't stand by and watch. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hannah saw several faces flush with shame, people who'd been there that day, watching. "I brought Hannah home to help with the children," Cole continued. "That's all it was supposed to be. Help. But she didn't just help. She brought life back to a house that had been dying. She made my children laugh again. She taught my oldest son that grief and joy could coexist. She saved my youngest daughter's life when fever almost took her." His voice roughened. "And somewhere in all of that, she taught me that I could love again. Not the same love I had before, but a different love. A love built on respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day." He turned fully to Hannah now, blocking out the crowd, making this moment just between them. "Hannah Creston Mercer, I didn't buy you that day. I freed you. But the truth is, you freed me too. Freed me from grief, from guilt, from the belief that I'd never feel whole again. I'm standing here today, in front of all these people who think they know our story, to tell you that I would choose you 1,000 times over. In any circumstance, any situation, I would choose you. Because you're the bravest person I know. Because you fight for what you love. Because you made a broken man believe in second chances." Hannah's vision blurred with tears. She heard sniffling in the crowd and realized she wasn't the only one crying. "So I'm not renewing vows because a court told me I had to," Cole said. "I'm renewing them because I want everyone here to know you're mine and I'm yours, and no judge or law or gossip is ever going to change that." Reverend Blackwood was wiping his own eyes. "Hannah, would you like to respond?" Hannah looked out at the crowd, at the faces watching her, some sympathetic, some still skeptical, some openly weeping. She saw the children in the front row, Jonah standing proud, Millie clutching Noah's hand, Caleb bouncing on his toes, Eli with tears streaming down his quiet face. She took a breath and spoke from the deepest part of her heart. 3 months ago, I stood on an auction block and learned exactly what the world thought I was worth. $1 silver, less than a hunting dog, someone said. And I believed it. Because for 3 years, ever since a doctor told me I'd never bear children, I'd been told my life had no purpose, that I was broken, useless, a burden. Her voice grew stronger. Then a stranger stepped forward and gave me that single silver dollar, not because he needed me, but because he saw me as human when nobody else did. He brought me to his home and introduced me to 5 children who were drowning in grief. Children who needed a mother but would never have come from my body. And do you know what I learned? She looked directly at Mrs. Thornton now. I learned that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about showing up every single day and choosing to love even when it's hard, even when fever threatens to steal a child away, even when a 12-year-old boy hates you because accepting you feels like betraying his dead mother, even when the whole world tells you you're not enough. Hannah turned back to Cole, taking both his hands. Cole Mercer, you didn't just save me from that auction block. You gave me a reason to believe I could be more than my broken body. You trusted me with your most precious treasures, your children. You let me into your grief and your healing. You made me believe that being unable to give birth didn't mean I couldn't be a mother, and you loved me, not despite my scars, but including them. Her voice dropped to nearly a whisper, meant for him alone but carrying across the silent yard. I would choose you too. In any life, any circumstance. I would choose this family, this love, this beautiful, chaotic, impossible life we're building together. Because you taught me that my worth isn't measured in what I can produce, but in how fiercely I can love. And Cole, I love you so fiercely it terrifies me. She was openly sobbing now, and so was Cole, and so was most of the crowd. Even Martha Simmons was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Reverend Blackwood's voice was thick with emotion. By the power vested in me, I pronounce you still husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Cole, again. Cole pulled Hannah into his arms and kissed her like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. The crowd erupted in applause, and the children rushed forward, wrapping themselves around their parents' legs, and for a moment the Mercer family stood united while the world watched. When Hannah finally looked up, she saw Mrs. Thornton standing apart from the celebrating crowd, her notebook clutched to her chest, her face unreadable. Their fate hung in that woman's hands, and Hannah had no idea which way the scales would tip. The celebration continued long into the evening, but Hannah couldn't shake the weight of Mrs. Thornton's silent observation. The woman stood at the edge of the festivities like a specter at a feast, her notebook still clutched to her chest, her expression revealing nothing. Every laugh from the children, every toast from well-wishers, every moment of joy felt fragile, like it could all shatter with a single stroke of that woman's pen. As twilight painted the sky purple and gold, Mrs. Thornton finally approached Cole and Hannah where they stood greeting guests. The noise around them seemed to dim, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, Mrs. Thornton said, her voice giving nothing away. Might I have a word? In private. Hannah's stomach dropped. Cole's hand found hers squeezing tight enough to hurt. They followed her away from the crowd, to the far side of the house where the garden Hannah had resurrected stretched toward the horizon. The tomato plant she'd nursed from death now climbed their stakes, heavy with green fruit that would ripen in the coming weeks. Mrs. Thornton stood there for a long moment, staring at those impossible tomatoes. I've been doing this work for 15 years, she finally said, investigating families, determining whether children are safe, whether homes are suitable. And in all that time, I've developed instincts about people, about which marriages will last and which will crumble, about which parents genuinely care and which are merely going through the motions. She turned to face them, and Hannah was startled to see tears in the stern woman's eyes. When I arrived here 3 days ago, I was certain I knew your story. A desperate man buying a desperate woman, a marriage of convenience that would inevitably fail, leaving 5 children traumatized and broken. I've seen it before, too many times, and I was prepared to recommend removal to prevent that inevitable harm. But, Cole's voice was barely a whisper. But then I watched you, Mrs. Thornton said. I watched Mrs. Mercer braid Millie's hair with the patience of someone who genuinely enjoys the task, not someone performing duty. I watched Mr. Mercer look at his wife like she hung the moon every time she entered a room. I watched Jonah, a boy so guarded he barely spoke during my interview, defend his stepmother with the ferocity of someone protecting his own heart. I watched Eli, who according to your records barely spoke for 2 years, read aloud at dinner with confidence because Mrs. Mercer had been practicing with him every single night. She paused, seeming to struggle with her words. And then today, I watched you both stand in front of a hostile crowd and lay your hearts bare. No pretense, no performance, just 2 people who found something rare and precious and are willing to fight for it. Hannah couldn't breathe, couldn't hope. I'm withdrawing my recommendation for removal, Mrs. Thornton said quietly. "And I'm filing a report with the court stating that these children are in a safe, loving home with parents who are more than adequately meeting their needs. Furthermore, I'm recommending that any future complaints about this family be investigated by an outside party, as it's clear to me that the original complaint was filed out of malice rather than genuine concern." The words took a moment to penetrate. Then Cole let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled Hannah against him so hard her feet left the ground. "Thank you," he choked out. "God, thank you." Mrs. Thornton allowed herself a small smile. "Don't thank me. Thank your wife. That stunt you pulled today, inviting the whole town to witness your love, was either brilliantly calculated or beautifully reckless. Either way, it worked, because I've never seen a community so thoroughly convinced of something in all my years." She shook her head wonderingly. "Even Martha Simmons, who filed the original complaint, came up to me during the reception and admitted she'd been wrong, said she'd been jealous of what you'd built here and wanted to see it fail. She's withdrawing her complaint entirely." Hannah's legs went weak with relief. Cole held her up, his face buried in her hair. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Thornton said, her voice gentling. "Mrs. Mercer, I know what it's like to be told you're worthless because your body doesn't work the way society expects. I was married once, years ago. I couldn't give my husband children, and eventually he left me for a woman who could. I threw myself into this work because if I couldn't be a mother myself, at least I could protect other people's children." She stepped closer, and Hannah saw the raw vulnerability in her face. "But watching you with those 5 children, seeing how they've bloomed under your care, has made me realize something. You are a mother, not in spite of your inability to give birth, but completely separate from it. Those children in there? They're yours in every way that truly matters, and anyone who says different is a fool." Hannah couldn't hold back her tears any longer. "Thank you," she whispered. "You'll never know what that means to me." Mrs. Thornton nodded briskly, her professional demeanor sliding back into place. "I'll be filing my report tomorrow and leaving on the evening stage. You should receive official notification of the case closure within 2 weeks." She paused at the corner of the house. "For what it's worth, I believe you two are going to make it. Against all odds, you've built something real. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." After she left, Cole and Hannah stood in the garden, holding each other as the stars began to emerge overhead. From the front yard came the sounds of celebration, the fiddle playing, children laughing, voices raised in song. "We won," Hannah whispered. "Hannah, we actually won." "You won," Cole corrected. "This was all you, your idea, your courage." "No," Hannah said firmly. "We won. Together. That's what family does." They returned to the party to find the Montgomerys waiting with their own news. Edwin pulled Cole aside while Patricia took Hannah's hands in hers. "We've been talking," Patricia said, "and we want you to know we're not going to be difficult grandparents. We're not going to interfere or make demands. We just want to be part of the children's lives, if you'll allow it. Letters, visits when we can manage them, but always on your terms." "We'd like that," Hannah said honestly. "The children should know their grandparents. They should know their mother's family." Edwin had finished his conversation with Cole and now joined them. "We're also setting up a trust fund for each child, for education, for their futures. It's what Sarah would have wanted, for her children to have opportunities." "You've already been so generous," Cole protested. "It's not generosity," Edwin said gruffly. "It's family, and whether we like it or not, we're all family now, even you," he added to Hannah, and there was acceptance in his voice, if not quite warmth yet. As the evening wore on and guests began to depart, each stopping to offer congratulations or apologies, Hannah felt something shift in her chest. The weight she'd been carrying since that day on the auction block, the shame, the sense of worthlessness, the fear that she'd never truly belong anywhere, began to lift. Martha Simmons was one of the last to leave. She approached Hannah hesitantly, her earlier smugness replaced by genuine remorse. "Mrs. Mercer, I owe you an apology. What I did, filing that complaint, it was cruel and petty and born out of my own unhappiness. Watching you and Mr. Mercer today, seeing the kind of love and commitment you share, I realized how wrong I was about you, about everything." She twisted her handkerchief in her hands. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Hannah could have been cold, could have sent the woman away with the contempt she deserved, but she'd learned something in her months at the Mercer Ranch. Holding on to bitterness only poisoned the person carrying it. Thank you for apologizing, Hannah said quietly. I accept it, and I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, whatever will make you happy. After Martha left, looking both relieved and chastened, Caleb appeared at Hannah's elbow. Mama, now that all the boring adult stuff is over, can we have cake? Please? I've been waiting forever and I'm starving and I might die if I don't get cake soon. Hannah laughed, the sound bright and free. Yes, sweetheart, let's cut the cake. The children descended on the dessert table like locusts, and for a while chaos reigned in the best possible way. Frosting ended up on faces, in hair, somehow on the dog that had wandered over from a neighboring ranch. The twins got into a cake fight that was quickly shut down by Jonah's stern intervention. Eli ate his slice methodically, savoring every bite, while Caleb inhaled 3 pieces and then complained of a stomachache. As the last guest departed and the children were herded inside for baths and bed, all protesting loudly that they weren't even tired, Cole and Hannah found themselves alone in the yard, surrounded by the debris of celebration. Leave it for tomorrow, Cole said, catching Hannah's hand as she bent to pick up fallen napkins. Tonight, just be with me. They walked out past the garden, past the barn where the horses nickered softly, to the rise where the land fell away and the valley spread out below them like a promise. The ranch building sat in a pool of lamplight, warm and inviting. Smoke curled from the chimney. Through the windows, they could see the children's silhouettes as they prepared for bed. Do you remember what you told me that first night? Cole asked. When I brought you home from the auction. I said a lot of things. I was terrified. You asked me their names, the children's names, not tell me about the job, or what do you expect from me, just their names. Like they were already the most important thing. Cole pulled her against his side, and they stood watching their home together. That's when I knew. Even before I consciously understood it, some part of me knew you were going to change everything. Hannah leaned into his warmth. I didn't change everything. We changed each other. That's what love does. It transforms both people until neither of them is quite who they were before. Profound for someone who claims she's just a simple woman, Cole teased gently. I am a simple woman. I just want a home, a family, a life that matters. That's not complicated. No, Cole agreed, but it's everything. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From the house came the sound of the twins' voices raised in argument about something inconsequential, then Jonah's stern command for quiet, then Millie's laughter like silver bells. They're going to be all right, Hannah said softly. All of them. Jonah will grow up to be strong and kind, like you. Caleb will probably drive us crazy with questions until he's 30, but he'll be brilliant. Eli will find his voice completely, maybe become a storyteller or a poet. And the twins, she laughed. God help us. The twins will probably never calm down, but they'll be joyful and fearless and full of life. You sound very certain, Cole observed. I am certain. Because they have us. They have a father who works himself to exhaustion to give them a good life. They have grandparents who want to support them. They have each other. And they have a mother who will fight like hell to protect them, even if she didn't give birth to a single one of them. Cole turned to face her fully, taking her face in his calloused hands. Hannah Mercer, do you have any idea how extraordinary you are? I'm not extraordinary. I'm just stubborn. You're both. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're the most stubbornly extraordinary person I've ever met, and I thank God every day that I was in that town square when I was, that I had the sense to step forward, that you had the courage to stay. Hannah kissed him, slow and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. We should probably go inside, she murmured, before the children destroy something. Probably, Cole agreed, but neither of them moved. They stood there, two people who'd been broken in different ways, now fitting together like they'd been designed for each other all along. And maybe they had been. Maybe every cruel word, every disappointment, Every moment of despair had been leading them both to that dusty town square where a silver dollar changed everything. The weeks that followed settled into a new normal that felt both comfortable and miraculous. With the court case resolved and the Montgomerys' financial support ensuring stability, the Mercer Ranch began to truly thrive. The two ranch hands Cole had hired took over much of the heavy labor, freeing Cole to spend more time with his family. The children flourished under this attention. Even Jonah, who'd carried the weight of responsibility for so long, began to act like a 12-year-old again, climbing trees and playing games instead of constantly worrying about everyone else. Hannah's garden became legendary in 3 counties. The tomatoes she'd nursed back from death produced fruit so abundant and sweet that neighbors came from miles around asking for her secret. She had no secret, she'd tell them. Just stubbornness and faith that dead things could live again if you cared for them properly. She knew they weren't really asking about tomatoes. As summer stretched toward autumn, life on the ranch took on a rhythm that felt inevitable, like this was how it had always been meant to be. Hannah taught the children reading and arithmetic at the kitchen table every morning. Cole taught them ranch work in the afternoons, how to mend fence, how to read the weather, how to gentle a nervous horse. Together, they taught them about family, about resilience, about how love could grow in the most unlikely soil. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, Millie climbed into Hannah's lap and asked the question that had clearly been on her mind for weeks. "Mama, how come you can't have babies?" The conversation around them stopped. Jonah looked up from the book he was reading. Caleb paused mid-question about whether ants could swim. Even the twins, who were supposed to be gathering eggs, froze on the porch steps. Hannah felt Cole's hand find hers, offering support, but she knew this was her answer to give. "Well," she said carefully, smoothing Millie's wild curls, "a few years ago, I had an accident with a horse. I got hurt inside, in the place where babies grow, and the doctor said that because of that hurt, I wouldn't be able to have babies of my own." "That's sad," Millie said solemnly. "Were you very sad?" "I was," Hannah admitted. "For a long time I was very sad, because I'd always wanted to be a mother, and I thought that meant I had to give birth. But then I met all of you and I learned something important." "What?" This came from Eli, who drifted closer to listen. "I learned that being a mother isn't about where babies come from. It's about who loves them and takes care of them and wants them to grow up happy and strong. You didn't grow in my body," Hannah said, looking at each child in turn, "but you grew in my heart, and that makes you just as much mine as if you had." "So you're our real mama?" Noah asked, his small face serious. "Even though you didn't birth us?" "I'm your real mama," Hannah confirmed, "just like your first mama was your real mama. You're lucky. You get to have 2 real mamas who love you, one in heaven and one right here." "That is lucky," Millie agreed. Then, with the pragmatism of a 5-year-old, she hopped off Hannah's lap and announced she was going to finish gathering eggs before it got too dark. But Jonah remained, his book closed on his lap. "My first mama would have liked you," he said quietly. "I think she would have been happy that you're the one taking care of us." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for saying that, Jonah. It means more than you know." "I mean it," he insisted. "I was thinking about it during the vow renewal when you and Papa were talking about choosing each other, and I realized Mama would have wanted Papa to be happy again. She wouldn't have wanted him to be alone forever. And she definitely would have wanted someone who'd fight for us the way you do." He paused, then added in a rush, "So it's okay. You being here. Being our mama. It's okay, and I'm glad, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it." Hannah stood and crossed to him, pulling him into a hug. He was getting so tall. Soon he'd be taller than her, but for now, he was still young enough to accept the embrace without embarrassment. "You have nothing to apologize for," she said into his hair. "You were protecting your mother's memory. That's not wrong. It's beautiful." That night, after all the children were in bed, Cole found Hannah in the garden, standing among the tomato plants in the moonlight. "Thought I might find you here," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "This is where you come when you need to think." "I come here when I need to remember," Hannah corrected. "When I first arrived, this garden was dead. Everyone said nothing would grow here. But I refused to believe that. I thought if I just worked hard enough, cared deeply enough, maybe I could bring it back to life. You did more than that. You made it better than it ever was before. Hannah turned in his arms to face him. Cole, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been in town that day? If you hadn't stepped forward? Every day, Cole admitted. And every day I thank God that I was there, that I had the courage to step forward, that you had the strength to stay. I almost didn't, stay. Those first few days I was so scared, so sure I'd fail, that I'd prove everyone right about how worthless I was. But you didn't fail. You succeeded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, including mine. Hannah rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I want you to know something. Even if we'd lost the case, even if they'd taken the children away and we'd had to start over with nothing, I would have stayed with you. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about the children and became about us, about you and me and what we've built together. Cole's arms tightened around her. I love you, Hannah Mercer, more than I thought it was possible to love someone again. You didn't just save my children, you saved me. We saved each other, Hannah whispered. That's what the best partnerships do. As autumn deepened into winter, the Mercer Ranch prepared for the cold months ahead. The harvest from Hannah's garden was preserved in jars that lined the pantry shelves, tomatoes and beans and pickles and preserves that would feed the family through the snow. The cattle were brought down from the high pastures. Wood was split and stacked. The children were outfitted with warm clothes, thanks to the Montgomerys' generosity. And on a cold December morning, Hannah woke to find the first snow falling softly outside her window. Cole's window now, as she'd officially moved into his room after the vow renewal, her small room converted into a sewing room where she could work in peace. She slipped out of bed without waking Cole and padded downstairs to start breakfast. But when she entered the kitchen, she found all 5 children already awake, huddled around the table, whispering. "Mama!" Millie shrieked when she saw Hannah. "We were planning a surprise, but now you've ruined it." "I don't think I've ruined anything," Hannah said, amused. "What kind of surprise?" The children exchanged glances. Finally, Jonah stood and cleared his throat with great formality. "We took a vote," he announced. "All 5 of us. And we want to know if it's okay if we start calling you Mama all the time, not just sometimes. Like, officially. Because Millie and Noah already do it, and Eli does it sometimes. And Caleb does it when he's not thinking, and He swallowed hard. "I'd like to do it too, if that's okay. If it doesn't make you uncomfortable." Hannah's throat closed up completely. She couldn't speak, could only nod as tears streamed down her face. "Is that a yes?" Caleb asked anxiously. "Because you're crying, and crying usually means sad, but you're smiling too, so I'm confused." "It's a yes," Hannah managed. "It's the biggest, most enthusiastic yes I've ever given in my life." The children erupted in cheers and rushed forward to hug her, all 5 of them trying to fit into her arms at once. She held them close, these precious souls that had become hers through circumstance and stayed hers through love. Cole appeared in the doorway, drawn by the noise, and took in the scene with understanding dawning on his face. "They asked, didn't they?" he said quietly. Hannah nodded, still unable to speak. "And you said yes." Another nod. Cole crossed the room and wrapped his arms around all 6 of them, his wife, his children, his family. "Then I guess we should make it official. We'll go to the courthouse after Christmas, file papers to have Hannah's name added to all the children's records as their legal mother. Make it so no court, no busybody, no one can ever question it again." "Can we do that?" Jonah asked, his voice full of hope. "We can do that," Cole confirmed. "Your mother will legally adopt all of you. You'll be Mercers in every possible way." The celebration that followed was loud and chaotic, with the twins galloping around the kitchen and Caleb asking 10,000 questions about the legal process, and Eli quietly smiling in a way that lit up his whole face. Even Jonah, usually so controlled, couldn't stop grinning. Christmas that year was the best Hannah could remember. The house was warm and full of laughter. The Montgomerys had sent gifts for the children, practical things like books and warm clothes, but also toys and sweets. Hannah had sewn new dresses for Millie and new shirts for the boys. Cole had carved each child a small wooden animal. Jonah got a horse, Caleb a fox, Eli a owl, and the twins each got a rabbit. But the best gift came after the children had gone to bed on Christmas Eve, stuffed with cookies and exhausted from excitement. Cole led Hannah back out to the porch, to their spot where they'd shared so many conversations. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside the box was a ring, not a gold band like her wedding ring, but a silver ring set with a single turquoise stone, the same turquoise as Sarah's hair comb that Millie had given her to wear at the vow renewal. "I had it made from one of Sarah's old pieces," Cole explained. "I wanted you to have something that connected you to her, to the children's history. Because Hannah, you're not replacing Sarah. You're continuing what she started. You're part of the same story, the same family line. And I wanted you to have something that showed that." Hannah slipped the ring onto her finger, watching it catch the moonlight. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You're perfect," Cole countered, "and I'm the luckiest man alive." As winter gave way to spring, the legal adoption was finalized. Hannah's name was added to all the children's records. She was officially, legally, irrevocably their mother. And though the paperwork was just a formality, they'd been her children in her heart for months. Having it written down felt like claiming a victory she'd been told was impossible. The years that followed were not without challenges. Jonah went through a difficult adolescence, testing boundaries and trying to find his place in the world. Caleb's endless questions sometimes drove everyone to distraction. Eli remained quiet and sensitive, needing extra patience and understanding. The twins' energy never diminished, leading to countless broken items and near disasters. There were crop failures and sick cattle and lean winters when even the Montgomery money was stretched thin. But through it all, the Mercer family held strong. Jonah grew into a young man who was serious and capable, taking over more and more of the ranch operations until he was running it alongside his father. At 19, he married a quiet girl from town and brought her home to the ranch, where Hannah taught her everything about keeping a frontier household running. When Jonah's first child was born, a daughter with wild blonde curls like Millie, he named her Sarah Hannah after both his mothers. Caleb, true to form, went to university with money from his trust fund and became a lawyer. He used his education to help frontier families navigate the complex legal systems that often worked against them. He never forgot the court case that had nearly destroyed his family, and he made it his life's work to ensure other families didn't face the same injustice. Eli found his voice not just metaphorically, but literally, becoming a traveling storyteller who moved from town to town sharing tales of the frontier. He collected stories from everyone he met, preserving them in journals that would one day become important historical records. And in every story he told, there was a thread of hope, of broken things being mended, of love conquering fear, of families formed by choice rather than blood. Millie grew into a young woman who was fierce and joyful, training to become a teacher so she could help other children learn to read and write. She wore her mother Sarah's hair comb on her wedding day and carried wildflowers that Hannah had helped her gather from the garden. Noah became a rancher like his father, and Jonah, but he also had a gift for training horses. People came from 3 territories to buy horses that Noah had trained, horses that were gentle and reliable and perfectly suited to frontier life. And through all of it, through weddings and grandchildren and losses and triumphs, Cole and Hannah grew old together on the porch of the ranch house, watching their family expand and flourish. 25 years after Hannah had been sold at auction for a single silver dollar, she stood in her garden on a warm summer evening. Her hair was streaked with gray now, and her hands were gnarled with arthritis, but the garden still thrived under her care. The tomato plants climbed their stakes as abundantly as ever, defying every prediction that nothing would grow in that soil. Cole found her there, moving slower now, but still strong, still steady. He wrapped his arms around her from behind in a gesture that had become ritual over the decades. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About worth," Hannah said quietly. "About how I used to measure my worth by what my body could produce, by whether I could give birth, and how wrong I was about everything." "You were never wrong about your worth," Cole said. "The world was wrong about how to measure it." Hannah turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd seen her value when no one else had. His face was weathered now, lined with age and hard work, but his eyes still held the same kindness they'd shown that day in the town square. "Do you know what I realized?" she asked. "My body did give life, just not in the way anyone expected. Every child I raised, every meal I cooked, every wound I bandaged, every nightmare I soothed, every lesson I taught, that was giving life. That was creation. I didn't birth children from my womb, but I birthed a family from my will and my love and my refusal to believe I was worthless." "You were never worthless," Cole said fiercely. "Not for one single moment." "I know that now," Hannah said. "It took me years to believe it, but I know it now. And Cole, if I could go back to that day, to that auction block, knowing everything that would happen, all the struggles and fears and hard times, I'd do it all again. Because being loved is worth any price. And loving this family, this life, this impossible, beautiful mess we built together, that's worth everything." Cole kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that contained 25 years of shared joy and sorrow, triumph and defeat, all of it woven together into something that transcended the circumstances that brought them together. From the house came the sound of voices, their children and grandchildren gathering for Sunday dinner, a tradition Hannah had started years ago and that the family still maintained. Jonah's children were arguing about something. Caleb's wife was laughing at one of her husband's stories. Eli's quiet voice was reading something aloud. The twins' families had arrived with their usual chaos. "We should go in," Hannah said, "before they eat all the food without us." "In a minute," Cole said, holding her close. "I want to stay here just a little longer, in this spot where miracles grow." They stood together in the garden as the sun set, two people who'd been broken and then made whole, watching the impossible tomatoes climb toward the sky. And on the fence post beside the garden gate, weathered but still legible, hung a wooden sign Cole had carved decades ago, "Not for sale." Strangers passing by assumed it referred to the land. The Mercer family knew better. It meant Hannah. It meant love. It meant a woman once sold for a single silver dollar who became priceless because someone finally saw her true value. It meant that some things, like tomatoes in poor soil, like love in unlikely places, like families formed from fragments, grow best when everyone else says they can't. It meant that worth isn't measured by what you can produce, but by how fiercely you can love. It meant that second chances are real, that redemption is possible, that broken things can be mended into something even stronger than they were before. And most of all, it meant home. The kind of home that exists not in buildings or land or blood ties, but in the choice to show up every single day and love with everything you have, even when, especially when, the world says you have nothing to give. Hannah Creston had been told she couldn't give children, but she'd given everything that mattered: love, hope, stability, faith. She'd given 5 broken children a reason to believe in family again. She'd given a grieving widower a reason to believe in love again. She'd given herself permission to believe she was worth more than the world's judgment. And in return, she'd received everything she'd ever wanted: a family who chose her as much as she chose them, a love that grew deeper with every passing year, and the quiet certainty that her life mattered, not because of what her body could do, but because of what her heart had dared to claim as her own. As the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Hannah and Cole finally returned to the house, to the noise and warmth and beautiful chaos of their family. And in the garden behind them, the tomato plants reached toward the heavens, green and abundant and thriving against all odds, growing miracles in impossible soil, just like love, just like family, just like a woman worth far more than a single silver dollar, priceless, precious, and finally home.